Chapter 10:24. The thoughtless sword was broken just like that. Then it gained its true freedom. The shackles of heaven and earth seemed to have been broken, and the sunlight became bright and spirited. It was all because of the change in Jingjiu. An elegant and pure immortal aura emanated from his body. He had become himself again. Zhao Liu stared at his wrist. The green rope of light was very faint and thin, and it was hard to notice if one didn't look carefully. At this time, the green rope of light began to thicken and become more real. As expected, as he really woke up, his consciousness began to become active, and the immortal began to overflow. The new inherited heaven sword also began to attack. Everyone's eyes fell on his wrist, feeling very uneasy. This was what they were most afraid of and wanted to avoid. The thoughtless sword was broken, and the snow girl was not here. How could Jingjiu resist the will of the Grandmaster? Time seemed to be flowing faster. The green rope of light became more and more tangible and gradually tightened, sinking into his skin. It looked very strange. Jingjiu's face was still pale, and his expression was still indifferent, but there was a hint of pain in the depth of his eyes. Shin Aoyama looked at him in silence, with sword light flashing in his eyes. There was sword light in the distant sea. There was sword light in the floating clouds high above. The sword formation of the solar system was disintegrating, but the all-things sword formation was where he was. Wherever his divine sense reached, it was covered by the sword formation. The program that was trying to control Jingjiu's body was the new inherited heaven sword that he had forged. The inherited heaven sword was also part of the all-things sword formation. No matter how strong Jingjiu's will was, he could not resist such control, and no one could interrupt the process. Zhao Liu and the others looked even paler than Jingjiu, but they could only stand there and watch. The snow girl was not here, and it seemed that no one could stop it. In the distant space, on the other side of the sun, the ellipsoidal super battleship had been dismantled into pieces. The black monolith floated silently in the midst of the rubble. It was no longer as serene as it had been in the past. It was more like a dead object. The Grandmaster of Aoyama really cared about Huashi's life and death and did not do anything. Ada brought the gold-threaded ball here, and sure enough, the black steel calmed down. But they also paid a huge price. The snow girl was squatting on the surface of the monolith. Her whole body was wet, and her eyes were closed. She seemed extremely weak. Sitting on the other side of the black monument, the dead dog breathed slowly with his eyes closed, recuperating from his wound. Ada hugged the sharp horn on top of the steel and dozed off with his eyes closed. A lot of his long hair had fallen off, and he looked extremely miserable. Sitting on its head, Cold Cicada held the small hollow ball made of golden threads tightly, its countless nimble eyes expressing its fear and nervousness with a few glows. Suddenly, the emotions in its eyes turned into confusion and uneasiness. Ada opened his eyes and looked at the sun. His pupils were illuminated by the sunlight. That was the color of fallen leaves. It felt a strong sense of fear and uneasiness, meowing timidly. The snow girl and the dead dog opened their eyes at the same time and looked in the direction of the sun, remaining silent. It was calm and peaceful. The pile of sand was like a grave. Two wheelchairs were next to each other. Jingjiu and Shun Aoyama were staring at each other. Two formidable wills were confronting each other. This kind of confrontation was both peaceful and exhausting. His Tao heart was being eroded by his indescribable Tao heart, which was beyond the meaning of pain. His face grew paler, and the expression in his eyes grew dimmer. On the contrary, his eyes and brows grew clearer, more perfect, and more solid. Both his slightly raised brows and the corners of his eyes showed signs of sharpness. Even the fairy aura exuding from his body had been replaced by the sword lights. His entire body seemed to be plated with a layer of metallic luster, and he was on the verge of turning into a human-shaped sword. Seeing this, the crowd felt heavy and worried, because they knew that he was being controlled more and more. It was as if the green rope of light was sinking deeper and deeper into his wrist. It wouldn't take long before his awareness would dissipate, and he would turn into the all-in-one sword again. This isn't something that can be resisted by wills, and it's not something that can be severed by sword wills. Shin Aoyama looked at Jingjiao and said, "Because it's not a chain, not a manacle, not even a sheath. It's your main program, and you were born to be controlled by it." Jingjiao said, "When the gods ignited those stars, this sword was nothing more than a sword. It didn't have any main program, and it didn't need to be controlled at all. It's just that this sword gave birth to a true spirit in the Chaotian continent, and you picked it up, worried that it wouldn't listen to your command. It spent so many years to come up with such a treacherous method." The meaning of this sentence was very clear. All things were born free. Shin Aoyama wasn't angry that the truth was exposed, and said, "But you can't get rid of this control in the end, unless your soul disperses and you die. But even if you die, I'll make good use of your body." The meaning of this sentence was also very clear. All things should be used by men. Jingjiao looked at his right hand. This hand was perfect, perfect in the literal sense of the word. Anyone who saw it would be in awe of him. In comparison to the youth in blue clothing in Building 720, this hand was more suitable for playing the piano. Of course, this perfect hand was suitable for everything, like making pottery, drawing pictures, stroking one's face gently, patting one's back gently, and holding the sword steadily. Looking at this perfect right hand, Jingjiao recalled something. Many years ago, he was brought to Aoyama by the Grandmaster Daoyuan from Zhaoga City and started to cultivate. Let's not mention the stories of his previous life. In this life, he came from a small village to the South Pine Pavilion and then entered the Shinma Peak. Many scenes flashed before his eyes. He used this perfect body to travel the world, attracting the gazes of countless people. He sat by the stream, soaked in the hot lava, and finally drifted up in the fiend prison. He raised his right hand and slashed downward. A bright sword light came out from the edge of his palm. The sword light illuminated the sandy beach, the surface of the ocean, and heaven and earth. There was a soft clank sound. His left hand was cut off at the wrist. The sand splashed. The broken hand fell to the ground, a few drops of golden blood splashing up. Unexpectedly, the first swing of Jingjiao's sword was not aimed at Shin Aoyama, but at himself. After a moment of deathly silence, a few surprised screams broke out on the sandy beach. Zhao Leiyu's face was pale as she guessed what Jingjiao intended to do. The others had gradually figured it out as well, but they were still shocked when they saw the broken hand on the sandy beach. Jingjiao's body was very hard, and it had reached an unimaginable level after he ascended and became a ferryman. The laboratory of the Federation of the Milky Way tried their best to extract even a tiny bit of material from his body. This was the first time anybody had seen such a serious injury on his body from Chaotian to this world. Nobody had witnessed it at the West Ocean. That person was no longer alive. As his left hand was cut off, the green light rope dropped down and disappeared after being covered by the sand. If it were so easy to get rid of the control of the inherited heaven sword, you wouldn't have hesitated until a moment ago. What Aoyama said shattered the expectation of Lu Shui and the others after the initial shock. In the next moment, the green light rope appeared again. This time, the green light rope came to the top of his left arm, near his shoulder. If the new inherited heaven sword were truly a shackle, it would be a shackle to his soul, which couldn't be removed by physical means. Jingjiao had anticipated this, so he didn't pay any attention to what his opponent said. He raised his right hand and swung it down again. Another bright sword light came out from the edge of his palm and landed precisely on his left shoulder. Crack! His left arm was cut off at the shoulder, making a thudding sound as it fell onto the sandy beach. Regardless of whether his arm was cut off or not, his countenance was as nonchalant as before, and his movements were as natural as before. It was not as natural as moving clouds and flowing water, but as logical as a program, with clear and coherent steps. Even though the crowd had seen the scene of his arm being cut off, they were still stunned. Even the fairy sword master, In Sheng, who had remained silent the entire time, couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The ferrymen didn't care about such a minor injury. The medical and technological facilities in the Federation of the Milky Way were highly developed, and the bionic mechanical arms were quite useful. Yet, it was still hard to imagine that one's arm could be cut off without even blinking his eyes. More importantly, it was no ordinary immortal body. It was the most perfect body in the history of time. The all-in-one sword could survive in heaven and earth in the form of all things. After the immortal Jingyang turned into a sword and was reborn, he became a perfect human body, both externally and internally. In Chaotian, the people had different reactions when they saw this body. Some of them were silent, some of them were envious, some of them yearned for it, and some of them were intoxicated by it. But none of them felt jealous of it because it was too beautiful. To say nothing of the powerful sword body that was so sharp that nothing could break it. Yet, the perfect body was cut into pieces by Jing Jiao and thrown onto the sandy beach. It was like throwing away the trash. Looking at this scene, everyone had extremely complicated feelings. They felt a bit sad, and even a bit scared. How merciless must he be to the world that he could be so cruel to himself? As far as she is concerned, the greatest possibility lies in his self-abandonment. Jing Jiao wiped his hands on his clothes and continued. Hence, he gave up his life in the galaxy beyond the fog. Shin Aoyama pressed with a cold expression in his eyes. So you're going to give up your body today? The infinite possibilities are very attractive, especially when I'm facing the moment when I've lost all the possibilities. Jing Jiao went on, and I've cut off one of his arms, but he helped me. It's a good chance for me to pay him back today. Shin Aoyama asked, You'd rather give up your body than be controlled by me? Jing Jiao didn't say anything because he didn't think it was necessary to explain, and he didn't have the energy to do so. I'd rather die than be free. The voice of Lu Shui was carried over by the seawater. The fairy swordsman, and Sheng lowered his eyelids slightly. Freedom? Shin Aoyama asked in a mocking tone. Yes, freedom, Lu Shui said earnestly while looking at him. Why do humans cultivate? Why do they need to ascend? Why does young master want to live forever? It's because it's freedom from death. I like what you said, but I didn't think too much about it. Jing Jiao continued while looking at Shin Aoyama. But you people always say that this body is a weapon left by God, the only way to deal with the sea of dark matter, and the only hope for humans. I'm tired of hearing it, so I don't want it anymore. Having said that, he pinched his ear with his right hand and tore it off slowly. Chapter 1025. Back when he was at the West Ocean, Jing Jiao's cultivation state was very low. His body was many times stronger than a regular cultivation practitioner's, but it was still not perfect. As a result, he was almost cut in half by Jian Shilai's full-powered sword. Since then, he hadn't suffered such a severe injury. A piece of his earlobe fell off during the fight with Nan Shu, and another piece of his earlobe fell off during the fight with Bai Yuan. His earlobe was the only defect on his perfect body, and it was also the weak point. Moreover, the prominent ear could be easily grabbed. As such, it was easy to tear it off. In fact, this movement didn't produce any sound, but the people on the beach seemed to have heard a tearing sound, as if a tough object had been torn to pieces forcefully. They all shuddered in fear. Jing Jiao tossed the half ear to the ground like a piece of waste paper. Next, he tore off the other ear. His movement was very coherent, and it looked casual, but it gave off a sense of seriousness. Neither the pale-faced Zhao Liu nor the cold-faced Tong Yin had time to do anything like asking him to stop. Two thin streams of blood trickled down from the broken ears. They looked like a stream in the mountain. The blood was not much, but it was mixed with some crystal particles. It didn't look bloody, but it had a strange sense of beauty, like some scenes in the Buddhist scripts. The green rope of light representing the inherited heaven sword moved from Jing Jiao's wrist to his arm, and now it was on his neck, replacing the thoughtless sword. As his arms were chopped off and his ears were torn off, the green rope of light grew dimmer. The purpose of the inherited heaven sword, regardless of whether it was a sheath or a program, was to control the all-in-one sword. If the all-in-one sword was destroyed, it would be useless. Philosophically and logically, This was the simplest and most unstoppable way to defeat the inherited heaven sword. The question was, would Jingjiu be able to survive after this perfect body was completely destroyed? "You've indeed come up with this wicked method," said Zhao Liu, while looking at his pale face. Jingjiu looked at her and explained seriously, "This method is a little difficult to do, but your body is really good." The all-in-one sword body was, of course, not bad. Even though his right hand was the edge of the all-in-one sword, the sharpest thing in the universe, it was still difficult for him to cut himself. "But you should remember that my body has some other weaknesses." Jingjiu raised his right hand and pointed at the corner of his eye with his fingertip. Zhao Liu's expression changed slightly. She wanted to stop him, but she didn't know what to say. There was a very small crack at the corner of his eye, much thinner than a strand of hair. It was very difficult to see with the naked eye. Even among the people on Shinma Peak, probably only Zhao Liu knew about this. Jingjiu's finger went to the corner of his eye. A sword light emerged from the tip of his finger and entered the tiny wound. His fingers slowly slid down from his temples to his chin, and then down again. Blood flowed from his fingertips, glistening in the sunlight. Jingjiu's fingers didn't stop there. They went down to his neck, chest, and abdomen, and went deeper and deeper. Splash! Splash! The sea was still frozen, so it was not the sound of waves. Some internal organs that looked like gems and chalcedony flowed out from his right hand. His expression was still calm, and no pain could be seen in his eyes. Everybody knew that it must have been an extreme pain. Even if the body didn't feel pain, how could the spiritual soul escape from it? I seem to have seen this scene in a story. Shen Yunmai's voice trembled slightly. Zhuo Ruzhui said, "It seems that a child in ancient times violated the law of heaven and implicated his family. As a result, he had to cut off his flesh and restore his bones." Shen Yunmai said in a trembling voice, "I remember it now, but it looks completely different." "Yes," Zhuo Ruzhui said after a moment of silence. The climax of the story was the scene where the flesh was cut off to restore the bones. It was particularly tragic and even tragic. Jingjiu was doing the same thing, but his actions and emotions were calm and even a bit mechanical. Tong Yin suddenly recalled the feeling when she and Jingjiu played Go for the first time at the Plum meeting in Zhaoga City many years ago. Jingjiu was such a person. Regardless of whether he was playing Go or doing anything else, he would have a clear goal and a precise procedure, even at the moment. He didn't destroy his body because he was annoyed by these things. He must have some other idea. "Enough," Shen Yunmai said icily while looking at his father. "Don't you understand what he meant? Crying, throwing a tantrum, and threatening to hang yourself?" Shen Aoyama said to Jingjiu in a mocking tone, "It's interesting to threaten me with such a shrewish method. I really don't want this body anymore." Jingjiu went on, "And I want to know one more thing. Do you want to obtain my body to save the world? Or do you want to subdue me to maintain your authority to rule this world?" "What's the difference?" asked Shen Aoyama. "If it's the former, how are you going to ignite the permanent star and save the humans if I destroy this body?" asked Jingjiu. Shen Aoyama said to him expressionlessly, "This body doesn't belong to you. You're merely a guest." There was a saying that had been repeated many times. Every living being was a passerby in heaven and earth. There was also a similar saying. Heaven and earth are the reverse journey of all living beings. The reverse journey here meant that it was an inn. They were all expressing the same opinion. They were all guests. If the all-in-one sword was a container or a carrier, then the spiritual soul of Jingjiu living in it was a guest. What reason did the guest have to deal with the inn, regardless of whether it was sold or destroyed? "It's not yours either," said Jingjiu. Shen Aoyama said, "Even if you don't agree that this sword was given to me by God, you should at least admit that it belongs to Ping Yongka. Don't forget that he is the true sword spirit. Why did you destroy the all-in-one sword without his consent? The all-in-one sword is like a mother's womb, and he is the child of the sword, just like the relationship between Qing, and the green sky mirror. How can you say that this sword belongs to him? Jing Jiu said, "All things are ownerless, and you and I are merely passerby. But I'm living here now, so I have the final say." Was the soul a passerby of the body? No, it was more accurate to say that it was a passerby of the material world. "Is that why you threatened me with suicide?" demanded Shun Aoyama while staring into his eyes. "Why do you think I'm threatening you with suicide? I wouldn't do such an unesthetic thing." Jingjiu asked while looking at him. "You said that you had read my book. Do you still remember the plot at the end?" The book, titled The Path Toward Heaven, was written in the apartment on the Mingxing Street on the Stargate base. The story stopped at the moment of his ascension. Before he ascended from Chaotian, all the cultivation sects in the cultivation world came to Aoyama and took part in the meeting. Before he left Chaotian, he told the cultivation practitioners 3 stories. The first story was about Chao Yuan's life, which stated that one had to be open-minded in the cultivation world. The second story was about Su Zai's life, which stated that one had to be open-minded in the cultivation world. The third story was about Su Zai's life, which stated that he would take off his clothes. There were 2 similar examples in the original story. He gave up his Tao body. He threw away the stick. The 3 stories were the last words left behind by Jingjiu before his ascension. The cultivation sects in Chaotian regarded them as the ultimate truth. They had studied them for hundreds of years and had come up with many theories based on them. Hearing Jingjiu's question, Tong Yin, Lu Shui, and the others recalled the 3 stories and many original words in the story. For instance, "I'll give up my Tao body one day." Thinking of the meaning of this statement and looking at Jing Jiu covered in blood, the group was stunned speechless. Zhao Liu was the most shocked of all. 100 years before her ascension in Chaotian, she had discussed with Lu Shui, Tong Yin, and Zhu Rizhui what to do after her ascension. She thought that Jing Jiu would have conflicts with those fairy masters of the past due to his temperament. Recalling that Jing Jiu said in the battleship that he had thought of a way to kill the great Grandmaster before his ascension, she realized that it was true. He had been wary of the great Grandmaster at the time, and had thought of a way to deal with him. His spiritual soul was inseparable from the all-in-one sword, so he couldn't separate his sword ghost from his body like Nanchu could. What if he encountered someone who could control the all-in-one sword after his ascension? The inherited heaven sword in Chaotian had been destroyed by him, but the inherited heaven sword was forged by the great Grandmaster. Couldn't he forge another one? Even if the great Grandmaster was not here, could the other fairy masters of the past, Aoyama, forge another one? It turned out that he had realized the hidden danger of this perfect body earlier than anybody else. This sword is the water in the pond warmed by the sun, and I'm the frog. This sword is the clothing, and I'm the woman who loves beauty. This sword is the stick, and I'm the flame that doesn't dare leave. It takes a great deal of courage to jump out of the pond, take off my clothes, and burn the stick. Jing Jiu continued while looking at Shun Aoyama. "You've done a good job. You've forced me to take this step, and you've given me the courage to give up. I'd like to express my gratitude to you." If the perfect body transformed by the all-in-one sword was the clothing, then he would take it off. He had helped the snow girl leave Chaotian, Qing, leave the green sky mirror, and Ping Yongka leave the all-in-one sword. All of them had done the same thing. However, the snow girl, Qing, and Ping Yongka were all born with spiritual bodies, so they could exist independently. He was a human, so his spiritual soul couldn't be separated from the all-in-one sword. What should he do then? There was nothing that couldn't be separated. Once the body was destroyed, the only thing left behind was the independent and free soul. Hua Shi, who was by the pond, suddenly lifted her head and shot a glance in his direction. "Take off your clothes and go. I think I've heard this before." Shin Aoyama continued after some thought. But how can a free soul last long? Neither the sword ghost nor the Yuanying could leave the body of the cultivation practitioners for a long time, and they were very weak outside the body, like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. It was how Lo Huainan died back then. Shin Aoyama had said that Nanchu employed the method of leaving the body of the sword ghost because he thought he was near the end of his life. What Jing Jiu intended to do now was to destroy his body completely, leaving only his spiritual soul. How could he continue living then? Jingjiu said, "The path toward heaven has reached this point, and no one has ever walked it before. All we can do is wait and see." You're lucky enough to transfer your spiritual soul to the all-in-one sword, but you're going to leave it now? If you leave the all-in-one sword, where will you go? Possession? No body can withstand your spiritual soul. Shin Aoyama pressed. Or, are you going to enter the green sky mirror or the grand nirvana? By then, you'll become a resentful ghost controlled by the spirit of the green sky mirror or the joyous monk. What's the difference between that and what you're most afraid of? Shin Yunmai's voice rang out, sounding more serious than ever. I think you should be more cautious. This old man is as afraid of death as you are, and he has done a great deal of research on the soul, even more so than the joyous monk. Do you remember the pair of ferrymen in black on Mars? And Tong Yin, you've seen those duplicates in the old house. He has done many experiments, hoping to transfer the soul perfectly or exist forever, but he has failed. Jingjiu knew that Shun Aoyama's warning and Shun Yunmai's warning were both reasonable. There were spirits like Qing, in Chaotian, and those resentful ghosts. Yet, those were not the real, independent spiritual souls. In the entire history of the cultivation circle, Jingjiu was the only one who had attempted to transfer the spiritual soul, save for the reincarnation of Zen Master. His big brother Taiping Jinren's total transformation had a serious problem, so it couldn't be counted as a success. Zen Master retained some memories of his previous life after reincarnation, but he wasn't sure if he was the same person. Jingjiu couldn't accept these two states. The all-in-one sword was nonetheless special, and Jingjiu had never thought of reincarnating his spiritual soul. The sword wheels filled the sky like the ocean. The rain and wind arrived. He arrived in this world where everything was quiet. Jingjiu's body emitted a brighter metallic glow, as if it would swallow the wheelchair under him. The fresh blood and the terrible wounds on his body were nowhere to be seen. The all-in-one sword appeared gradually. "It's an unparalleled sword," Shin Aoyama remarked sentimentally. "I haven't seen it for many years." Taiping Jinren had said something similar back then. Jingjiu's right hand could be vaguely seen falling down amid the scorching sunlight. Would this unparalleled sword be destroyed in such a way? A person can't stand up by holding his own hair. How can a sword cut himself in half? Looking at the spot, Shun Yunmai said in a perplexed and excited manner, "I'd like to know what will happen in the end." Nobody could see the end because the sword light was too bright and dazzling. A figure walked out of the ball of sword light. The figure was not tall, and it was a child. However, it was hard to see his face clearly, and it was hard to tell his gender. Was this the spiritual soul of Jingjiu? The child's bare feet landed on the sand, and he took a step forward clumsily, as if he had just learned how to walk. This was probably the first step of a child, and it was also the most important step for humans. Chapter 1026. No matter how the human civilization developed, or in other words, evolved, modified, or cultivated, it was all about making choices. Jingjiu and Grandmaster Aoyama had chosen different paths in the relationship between themselves and the world. They had both reached the highest position and the deepest realm. To put it in a less accurate way, they were the predecessors of the human civilization and the latter. From the beginning to the end, the battle between them had been static. As a result, the ocean waves were like sculptures, and the coconut grove was like a painting. Shun Aoyama's body was already very weak, and he could only use his divine sense to control the all-things sword formation. But his divine sense was truly unimaginably strong. The all-things sword formation controlled all rules, and neither Peng Lang nor Zhao Liu could touch his body. Jingjiu's body was perfect, but it had become his own shackles. Controlled by Aoyama using the inherited heaven sword, he couldn't do anything but sit in the wheelchair. The two wheelchairs on the beach were like a debate, but it was more dangerous than any battle. It involved the forbidden zone of the soul, the other shore of the great path, the will of that god, the fate of mankind, and even the legacy of that unknown civilization. The greatest possibility was in the abandonment. Jing Jiao abandoned his body, but he managed to stand up from the wheelchair and take the first step forward. Shin Aoyama stared at the child and asked with an unusually serious expression, "How does it feel?" The child, condensed from light and shadow, should be Jing Jiao's spiritual soul. How could a spiritual soul answer a question? It feels a little strange, but also interesting. The child's voice was Jing Jiao's, just a little immature. The most important difference was that this voice wasn't made by the vibration of the air, but could be heard clearly. It was more faintly discernible than ordinary voices, and it was somewhat similar to the celestial voice in human imagination. "Is that so?" Shin Aoyama leaned forward slightly, a complicated expression in his eyes. The child didn't say anything else. He raised his left foot shakily and took another step forward. The moment the little foot, which seemed to be condensed from clear light, landed on the sand, countless thunders rang out in the sky. Countless sword wills descended from the sky, gleaming with cold light and slashing toward the child. No one fully understood what a soul was, but one thing was certain. It was a non-physical existence, or in other words, an existence that could not be called an existence. If it was a flying sword, it naturally would not be able to hit the soul. However, the sword intent came from all living things and existed between reality and illusion. Silently, a few waves on the beach broke, and several white marks appeared on the child's body. Those white traces were not material. They should be some kind of spatial distortion that caused extremely small turbulence lines in the air. The child looked down at his own body and touched it with his little hand. But he touched nothing. It was obvious that he was still adapting to this new and unfamiliar state. The next moment, countless sword wills came from the sea and brushed against his body like a spring breeze. Those white lines were instantly and gently wiped away. The sword intent came from all things. Everything in the ancestral star belonged to Shin Aoyama, but it could also belong to Jing Jiao. No, all things were their own. They could only be used by these two people. Jing Jiao was no longer under the control of the inherited heaven sword. He was only a spirit, so he could naturally use the all-things sword formation. Perhaps it was because the spirit had a more direct connection with all things, or for other reasons. But the speed at which he wielded his sword was even faster than Shin Aoyama's. Several sword wills floated to the front of Shin Aoyama, blossoming like flowers. Jing Jiao silently returned a few blows. Unexpectedly, he did not continue to attack Shin Aoyama. Instead, he lifted his other foot and clumsily tried to move forward again. Even more unexpectedly, Shin Aoyama's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. The child's third step was a bit unsteady, and he almost fell. He spread his two thin arms and swayed for a long time. It looked like he was dancing. It was very cute. Shin Aoyama's expression was cold. The wheelchair he was sitting on took a step back soundlessly. Why did Jing Jiao walk to the front of the wheelchair? What was he afraid of? The child continued to move forward. There were no footprints left on the beach. He walked more and more steadily, faster and more excitedly, as if he were dancing with joy. It was like playing with the palace made in the royal palace of Zhaoga City. It was like playing with the all-in-one sword on the peak of Shangda Peak. Shin Aoyama's wheelchair kept moving backward, and it moved faster and faster, leaving a clear arc on the beach. The wheelchair was stopped by a hard object, and it had already moved to the edge of the pond. The fish in the pond were motionless, as if they were sealed in the blue glass or hovering in the sky. A few bamboo poles were stuck in the sand, their heads drooping weakly. Sitting on a small stool, Huashi supported her chin with her hands, looking at the scene with a distant and bewildered expression in her eyes. It was not that he had nowhere to retreat to when he reached the edge of the pond. With Shin Aoyama's magic power, he could make the wheelchair fly like in the movies. He could fly over the cliff mountains on the island, over the ocean, and over the incomplete moon. But he knew that he couldn't retreat any further. A gentle wind came out from his body, making those bamboo poles quiver slightly. The fish in the pond seemed to come back to life. Innumerable tiny glows came out from the sprays on the seashore. A pure and powerful spiritual awareness enshrouded the whole planet. Innumerable sword wills came out from everything, filling up the entire space like the invisible raindrops. A young man walked out from the sky, full of sword wills, wearing simple clothes and holding a hatchet in his hand. He looked like a woodcutter. Shinaoyama looked at the child in front of him and said, "Let's see which one of us can go further." Having said that, the young woodcutter walked forward and hacked at the child's neck with his hatchet. The hatchet fell soundlessly, and it didn't emit any glow, as if it didn't exist. The young woodcutter wasn't an illusionary image condensed by the sword wills, but a manifestation of Shun Aoyama's spiritual awareness. The all-in-all and one sword wills were fair to him and Jingjio, and both of them could use them. What mattered now was whether his spiritual awareness was stronger or the spiritual soul of that child. Jingjio was stronger. The young woodcutter's hatchet didn't land on the child's neck. The tip of the hatchet stopped when it was half a foot away from the child's fair skin. Innumerable sword lights appeared on the surface of the ancestral star, followed by innumerable sword chimes. The chimes of the swords didn't stop, sounding like thunder in everyone's ears, and also like the sunlight seeping through the clouds, shining on their hearts. No matter if it was Zhao Liu, Ruzhui, or Tong Yin, none of them could withstand the pressure and fell to the beach. The expressions of Peng Lang and Lu Shisui changed slightly, and they took a few more steps back into the sea, bringing up the splashing sound of water. Not far away, the sunlight reflected by the surface of the sea turned into countless fine lines, intersecting with each other and bursting out fragmented lights like fireworks. Some of the still fishes in the pond began to move. The sunlight reflected by their scales was also fragmented and dazzling. The coconut grove was no longer still, swaying along with the wind, shattering the sunlight and making everyone's vision a little uneasy. Some of the waves collapsed like ice sculptures that had been defrosted, and the white lines inside floated up like catkins, or like a school of silvery fish that had suddenly leaped out of the distant sea. Sword immortal, and Shung wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, and turned to look at the depths of the sea, a hint of admiration in his eyes. Everyone present had the same feeling as him, because they were all sword practitioners and could understand what was going on. The waves continued to melt, began to undulate, and slowly hit the beach. Countless sword lights continued to shine. Sword chimes continued to sound. This planet had already become a world of swords. Sword intent was everywhere. There was no end to it. There was no end to it. There was no end to it. No matter how beautiful the scene was, it could not attract everyone's attention for a long time. Insheng quickly turned his head and looked at the side of the pool. Zhao Liu was staring over there, not leaving for even a moment. Shinaoyama sat in his wheelchair, his body slightly leaning forward, looking at the child in front of him. The young woodcutter stood behind the child, holding the chopper in his hand, chopping down. The child spread his arms, as if preparing to dance. This scene was somewhat comical, but also seemed to have a lot of meaning, like an experimental play. Everyone knew that beyond this scene, countless dangers were hidden. Those dangers were on the island and in the sky. This battle was happening everywhere on this planet. It could be a mola mola trying to kill a silver shrimp. It could be a blade of grass trying to swallow a fly. It could be a stone falling from the edge of the cliff, smashing the snow lotus below. It could be that the fog in the mountains had just risen and was about to be swallowed by the clouds. No one knew whether the final winner would be the fog, the stone, or the shrimp. The atmosphere was getting more and more tense. Zhao Liu's face was getting paler and paler, because the light and shadow of the child were getting fainter and fainter, gradually merging with the surrounding environment. That was a sign of the spiritual soul dispersing. It was indeed difficult for the soul to exist alone in the material world for a long time. Was this the price of freedom? So this was Shun Aoyama's intention. The wheelchair kept moving backward, and his spiritual consciousness came out of the sky, full of sword intent, all to waste time. Time was a real divine weapon, and also the thing that the child was most afraid of. The chopper in the young woodcutter's hand slowly moved down, gradually approaching the child's neck. The child's figure was getting fainter and fainter, as if it would disappear the next moment. The next moment, he suddenly hummed a song with a childish voice. "You're my heart, you are my lungs, you are my—" Obviously, this was a terrible nursery rhyme. The scene was really strange. Accompanied by the chilling song, the child's body and feet also moved. It was not dancing, but skipping. There seemed to be an invisible line in front of the wheelchair, and his feet were constantly moving back and forth on that line, like a naughty grandson playing with his grandfather. There was a clap. The child jumped up and landed on Shun Aoyama's knee. Standing on his knee, he was at the same level as Shun Aoyama. The child looked into Shun Aoyama's eyes and happily said in a childish voice, "I won." End of this chapter. Chapter 10:27. Had he won? How could he have won? Rijui had almost shouted this out, but he swallowed the words back when he saw the expressions on the faces of Zhao Liu and the others and the complicated expression on Shun Yunmai's head. Yet he was still baffled. The child had been hobbling toward the wheelchair, and the wheelchair had been moving backward. Then, the child jumped onto the wheelchair. This sword fight, which should have been spectacular and was indeed spectacular, had ended in such a manner? You didn't use Nan Chu's sword ghost, but your spiritual soul left your body. How could you be so powerful? Shun Aoyama asked while looking at the child on his knee. Is it possible to walk this path? We've walked the same path. The child continued while looking at him, but I've walked a bit further than you. The other shore was not the end of the path. It was merely a small river. There were many high mountains on the other side of the river, and everybody was climbing the mountains. There might be many paths to climb the mountains, but the peak tops were all the same. Regardless of whether it was an active or passive choice, it seemed that the path of cultivation had gradually drifted away from reality. Shun Aoyama's body was old, and he couldn't find a perfect method to transfer his soul. As such, he chose to place his awareness in the all-in-one sword formation, but he still kept a part of his body. He didn't dare leave it completely. It was probably because he was afraid of the unknown existence, or it was because he still had time. "Why can you do it?" asked Shun Aoyama. The child said, "After you left, many outstanding figures emerged in Chaotian, like Nan Chu, Big Brother Taiping, and the former king of the underworld. Their cultivation paths all fell on me. As such, I'm more stable and determined than you are." The path they mentioned in this conversation was the path that didn't require their bodies. In short, it was the same sentence. "Take off your clothes and go," Shun Aoyama said after some thought. "I remember that someone said the same thing here hundreds of thousands of years ago." Sitting on a small stool, Huashi said, "It's not here. It's another mountain." "Oh, it's another mountain." Shun Aoyama told the child, "You might not know this, but this island used to be a mountain many thousands of years ago, and we are now at the top of the mountain. The human civilization has been reincarnated, and the surface of the home world has been destroyed countless times." The child didn't say anything, nor did he urge him, even though his body was about to disappear. If you can survive, there are some things you should take a look at, and then try your best to let the human race survive. Shun Aoyama looked at the child and said, "If you think you're human, what about you?" Huashi suddenly raised her head, looked at him expressionlessly, and said, "You don't care? Didn't you say that you could solve all problems?" Shun Aoyama said, "A few years ago, I found an ancient poem in some ruins. Everyone thought to themselves, what kind of situation is this? You still have the mood to recite poetry?" Naturally, Shun Aoyama ignored them. He looked at the soul in the deepest part of Huashi's eyes and chanted softly, "I'll return the stone to the stone and let the winner win." Tonight, the highland barley belongs to him alone. Everything is growing. Tonight, I only have the beautiful gobi empty. Big sister, I don't care about the human race tonight. I only think of you. Big sister? Was this what Shun Aoyama called that young woman after he ascended from Chaotian and came to this world? Judging from her age, it was not wrong to call her that, but it was unknown how many stories had happened back then. It was deathly quiet on the small island. The sword wheels were still drifting in heaven and earth. Huashi's eyelashes quivered a few times, and then she let go of her hand helplessly. She held the stone she picked up by the seashore in her hand. That stone came from a moon, damaged and slightly burnt, with a very sharp edge. She had hidden this stone in her small hand for a long time. "I'm sorry," she said to Shun Aoyama. "When they used me to threaten you, I didn't want to kill myself." Shun Aoyama said, "If I had an endless life like you, I wouldn't have done it." Huashi said in a self-mocking tone, "Do you think I can still live?" Shun Aoyama said, "Based on my understanding of the disciples of Aoyama, they usually keep their promises when you are not a threat to them. So you should be able to live, and I hope you can live for many years." "Yes," Zhao Liu said in the distance, "you will live." Lu Shui added, "This is our promise." Shin Aoyama looked at the child on his lap and said, "Look, you said that the Aoyama sect has nothing to do with me. You're wrong." The child said, "Perhaps. She will live, but you will die." Shin Aoyama laughed, saying, "Back when I used the sword to comprehend the Tao, I founded a sect hundreds of years later. As I learned more about the Tao, I had a deeper question in my mind. So I left the mountain and traveled around the land, looking for those new sects and asking people I met." "What question?" asked Jing Jiao. Shin Aoyama said, "I asked those people if they wanted to die." Hearing this, the crowd naturally thought of the famous catchphrase of the Aoyama sect, and their expressions changed slightly. Shin Aoyama continued, "I really wanted to know the answer to this question, but most of the cultivators felt that I was humiliating them, and they couldn't help but fight. So they died. I was thinking, do they really want to die?" The crowd's expressions became even more interesting. Only today did they know that the famous catchphrase of the Aoyama sect came from this. The infamy of the Aoyama sect probably came from those bloody battles. Who would want to die? Since they don't want to die, why don't they strive to live? Shin Aoyama looked at the child and said, "Only many years later did I realize that this has nothing to do with talent, and it has nothing to do with rules. It's just that even if you don't stop living, you will grow old, and when you grow old, you will naturally want to die." Zhuo Rijui's gaze fell on his lap. Thinking of the scenes he had seen in the past year, he felt a little sad. That body of mine doesn't feel anything. It's even scarier than growing old. The child said to Shin Aoyama, "But I still don't want to die. Although I don't know what your reason for living is. You are indeed more determined than I am." Shin Aoyama said, "But now I'm not afraid of death, so come." As soon as he finished speaking, the young woodcutter's chopping knife finally fell. Without a sound, the blade cut through nothingness. The child jumped into the arms of Shun Aoyama and disappeared. The young woodcutter put the chopping knife back into his belt, glanced at Shun Aoyama reluctantly, and then turned around and walked into the sword wheel. The sword wheel that filled the sky suddenly dispersed. Everything was calm. Zhuo Rizhui understood. Everyone understood now. Why Shin Aoyama didn't dare to let the child near him. The child was in his body at the moment. This was possession. Jing Jiao didn't want this old body to be the third residence of his spiritual soul. He only wanted to destroy this body, and then destroy the source of the spiritual soul, and kill him completely. "Do you have anything else to say?" The child's childish voice floated between heaven and earth. Shin Aoyama said, "We'll talk about other things later. What I want to know now is, can you still put your clothes on after you take them off?" The child said, "I plan to wear them for a few more days, and then I won't wear them anymore." Shin Aoyama said nothing more. How did Jing Jiao plan to kill him? The lone sword flew through the air to the wheelchair. Shin Aoyama grabbed the hilt of the sword, placed it across his neck, and made a light cut. There was a soft clap. His head fell into the pond. The headless body gradually dissolved in the wheelchair, turned into sand, and was blown away by the wind. The child appeared in the wheelchair. Compared to his body, the wheelchair was very big, very empty, and very cold. It was quiet on the small island, but there was the sound of water. It was Shin Aoyama's head bobbing up and down in the pond. The fish, which were rarely caught by him, fled to the four corners in fear, wondering if they would pounce on him later. Heavy footsteps could be heard on the beach. The shabby robot finally moved and ran to the edge of the pond. The robot leaned forward clumsily, as if it wanted to see the scene inside clearly. There was no cover in the control room, so Shun Yunmai's head fell into the water with a plop. The heads of the father and the son were floating on the water, not far from each other, and their eyes were staring at each other. Shin Yunmai wanted to complain that he didn't tell his last words to himself, but to the little girl. He opened his mouth and swallowed a few mouthfuls of water. Then he looked up at the sky hastily to avoid the discomfort of having his nose filled with water. "Hey, are you in pain?" he asked while looking at the sky. Note, this is an excerpt from Hai Zi's poem, I'm in Dalinga Tonight. I know this poem has been used too much, but it's really suitable for them to use. I decided to use it after hesitating for half a year. I don't care about it now. Chapter 1028. It does hurt a little. You asked me to read those books when I was little. I remembered there was a story called Sword Casting. The guy in the story had his head fall into the pot and bit his enemy to death. I told him it was nonsense. How could he survive with only a head? You told me I only needed to keep my head. Hey, have you been lying to me since then? Yes. So it's like that. Now you have only a head like me. Ha ha. I'm sorry. Hearing his father's apology, Shin Yunmai fell silent for a while and said in a low voice, "It's okay. You'll get used to it after some time. Like me, I haven't come here for so many years." Shin Aoyama said with a smile, "I'm running out of time." Shin Yunmai said expressionlessly, "Why do I have a good relationship with Jingjio? It's for this moment. I've known you can't defeat him. Even I can't defeat him. How can you defeat him?" Shin Aoyama said, "I'm old, so it's time for me to die." Shin Yunmai sneered, "Do you want me to bite you to death? That's disgusting." Rujui came to the edge of the pool and knelt down on the sand. He had read that story, so he knew Shin Yunmai was talking about the plot in the story. The author also said that if you want to become an immortal after becoming a human being, you should ascend to heaven even if you were born on the ground. No matter whether he was mocking us or not, thinking about it is really important. Shin Aoyama looked at Rujui and said, "Your problem is that you think too much, but it's always not important." Rujui thought of his hundreds of years of cultivation, and his back broke out in a cold sweat. The rest of the people came over one after another. Insheng knelt down on the ground. "How long do you want to tell me your last words?" Shin Yunmai said impatiently, "Old man, tell me the truth before you die. When you attacked me that time, did you want to exile me? Or did you want to leave some hope for the human beings?" Shin Aoyama said, "I did a deduction. I wanted to kill you directly, but I thought it was a pity. After all, you were the best combination of the two civilizations, so I chose to exile you. Of course, I wanted to leave some hope for the human beings." Shin Yunmai exclaimed in shock, "Deduction? You're going to kill your own son just because of fortune-telling?" Shin Aoyama said, "It's my fault for giving you a bad name back then." Buried clouds, Aoyama, the meaning of this name was indeed somewhat inauspicious. From the looks of it now, this statement had really come true. "How good can your own name be?" Shin Aoyama, Shin Yunmai said with a sneer. "The Aoyama sect that you've created is destined to sink in your own hands." "Yeah, my name isn't good either," Shin Aoyama said, "but Aoyama is a sword, not a boat. It can be broken, so how can it sink?" The water in the pool rippled, slowly turning his head. His eyes swept over Insheng, Zhao Liu, Lu Shisui, Zhu Rujui, Peng Lang, Tong Yin, and the others, and finally landed on the child in the wheelchair. In many ways, these people were his disciples. Aoyama was named after him. It was still there. Is this also a kind of immortality? He closed his eyes. A jet of golden light appeared in the pool. When a most powerful divine awareness dissipated, it naturally triggered a strange phenomenon. Strangely enough, the world was quiet. The small island was quiet again. Shin Yunmai looked at the place where the golden light disappeared, remaining silent and expressionless. At this moment, he didn't know what he should say or what kind of expression he should show. Tong Yin reached his hand into the pond and lifted his head up from the water. Shin Yunmai woke up with a start and began to curse unconsciously. What he cursed was, "My father has just died, so why don't you let me grieve for a while? How dare you lift me with only one hand? Are you trying to imitate Jing Jio's handbag? It was not until Tong Yin put him back into the control room of the robot that he understood what she meant. The robot knelt down with an unpleasant sound of friction. Everybody knelt down, including Zhao Liu, Tong Yin, and Peng Lang. Those ferrymen on Mars must have sensed the departure of the Grandmasters and knelt down by the cliff's edge or in the cloud boat. There was no need to mention those great achievements. Just based on his identity as the first human to ascend, Shun Qingshan was qualified to accept these. The child sat in the wheelchair, his hands resting on the armrest reluctantly, but he didn't kneel down. The little girl Hua, she sat on a small stool, but she didn't kneel down. Looking at the bewildered fish in the pool, she asked with a bewildered expression, "What will you do next?" "I don't know," the child said. "I haven't decided yet." Zhao Liu got up and came to the side of the wheelchair, taking out the green sky mirror. The others looked at her. The light and shadow of the child were very faint, almost transparent. "Don't," said the child. Zhao Liu said, "Don't believe what Shinaoyama said. Qing'er won't harm you. Be good." She said the last word awkwardly because she had never coaxed him before. In the eyes of others, she was indifferent, arrogant, and boring, but she was always the one being coaxed in front of Jingjio. Lu Shui was also worried, asking, "Can I use these magic treasures of mine?" "Don't worry, I won't die." The child drifted up from the wheelchair and arrived at the seashore at an unimaginable speed. Unlike the teleportation of the underworld fairy sword and the escape method of heaven and earth, it was more like a natural change of position in the space. Seeing this scene, the group was startled. The child felt surprised as well, saying in a childish voice, "The body follows the will. That's why." Having said that, he jumped onto another wheelchair, turned around, and lay down on it. The sword light had gradually faded away, exposing Jingjio, who was covered in blood. Zhao Liu grabbed the blanket and covered Jingjio's body to prevent the bloody scenes from being exposed. Jingjio leaned against the back of the chair, saying nothing. "How long can this body last?" asked Zhao Liu. 9 days, answered Jingjio. The group, who were still shocked by the passing of the great master, came back to their senses upon hearing this. Lu Shui and Peng Lang came to the lakeside of the coconut grove, looking at Jingjio in the wheelchair worriedly, not knowing what to do. Jingyang's spiritual soul and the all-in-one sword combined to become Jingjio. They couldn't be separated from each other. In order to separate his spiritual soul from this body, he had destroyed himself thoroughly. No matter how powerful the all-in-one sword was, it would disintegrate soon. Was he really going to end up in a miserable state where his soul had no place to rest after 9 days? "What are you doing?" Lu Shui suddenly asked in surprise. Tong Yin was collecting those things scattered on the beach. Those things looked clear and transparent, some of them sparkling and eye-catching, and some of them were beautiful. But thinking that they were the internal organs that Jingjio had cut open, she couldn't help but feel disgusted. Why did he collect them? "If you want to try to repair the all-in-one sword, you'll definitely need these things," said Tong Yin. Jingjio said, "Even if it could be repaired, I wouldn't want it." Tong Yin said, "Humans need it. Maybe 300 years later, we'll need it to ignite the stars." Zhou Ruzhui said, "The great master said that nobody could repair the all-in-one sword." Tong Yin said, "Those are also precious materials. We can't waste them." Zhou Ruzhui thought for a while and said, "That makes sense." Tong Yin put all those things into the stomach of the old dragon and handed them to Lu Shui. Seeing this scene, Zhou Ruzhui wanted to comment reflexively that it was similar to the fried chicken with pork belly, but he remembered that the Grandmaster had just passed away and Jingjio was on the verge of death, so he refrained from saying so. Tong Yin looked at Jingjio and asked, "What are you going to do with the snow girl?" Shin Aoyama was dead, and the sword formation of the solar system was collapsing. It wouldn't be long before the fleet of the Federation of the Milky Way would arrive. By then, Jingjio would be the ruler of this world. Even though he would leave this world soon, it was still his responsibility to arrange this world. "Do you want him to say his last words?" Zhao Liu asked while looking at Tong Yin. "No," Tong Yin said. "I mean, should we kill the snow girl?" Peng Lang looked at her and said seriously, "I'm here. Dear friends, tomorrow morning, August 12th, 00, an animated cartoon of the same name, based on the ear-shaped A Thought Forever, was broadcasted. The first 3 episodes were broadcasted consecutively. It was broadcasted exclusively by Tencent Video every Wednesday. Please enjoy it. This is a link to the promotional video. I don't know if it can be displayed. Let's give it a try." Chapter 10:29. The Federation of the Milky Way was under the control of Zhao Liu and Qing, and the great Grandmaster of Aoyama had passed away. They were no longer a threat. The agreement between the Snow Girl and Jingjiu had come to an end. What should they do next? The catastrophe brought by the Sea of Dark Matter would happen hundreds of years later, but she was here. Would she become the greatest threat to the humans? Zhao Liu said to Tong Yin, "If it weren't for the sake of the Snow Girl's life, we wouldn't be here." If Jingjiu wanted the Snow Girl dead, he could have stayed on Mars and waited for the sword formation of the solar system to collapse and the fleet of the Federation of the Milky Way to arrive. There was no need for him to take the risk of coming to the ancestral planet and ending up in such a state. Tong Yin said expressionlessly, "The situation has changed. It's the best opportunity to kill the Snow Girl." "I don't think so," said Peng Lang. Tong Yin fell silent for a while before saying, "It's just a joke. Why do you take it so seriously?" It was rare for Jingjiu to make such a witty remark. Everybody knew that it was because he had seen through Peng Lang's attitude and realized that he had to pay a higher price to kill the Snow Girl. But it was also evident that he was quite relaxed. The great Grandmaster was dead, and the world was safe. Jingjiu was the only one facing the danger of death. Everybody fixed their gazes on Jingjiu again. Jingjiu lifted the blanket off his body slowly. His movement was slow and clumsy, as if he didn't know how to raise his arm and spread his fingers. It was the same as when he walked out of the mountain through the waterfall and came to the shore to chop firewood many years ago. Jingjiu shot a glance at Lu Shisui. Lu Shisui understood what Jingjiu meant. He took out the 10,000 soul banner as quickly as he could and covered Jingjiu's body with it. The 10,000 soul banner was badly damaged by the sword wills of Shun Aoyama and covered Jingjiu's body with it. It was a terrible and hideous scene. Countless gloomy soul fires left the banner and sank into Jingjiu's body. Jingjiu felt a bit better now. Zhao Liu tore off a section of her sleeve and wet it with some water from the air. She began to carefully wipe the blood stains off his face. Jingjiu said, "Let Qing'er go." Zhao Liu uttered, The green girl flew out. Seeing Jingjiu's appearance, she couldn't help but be startled. Before she could ask anything, she heard Zhao Liu's words. "Go to the sun and tell Ada that everything is fine here. Come back." Qing'er couldn't help but look at Jingjiu again. She flapped her transparent wings and flew into the sky. After a few moments, she turned into a blue bird and disappeared from everyone's sight. The solar system sword formation was about to be completely destroyed. There was no sword will in space, so she could fly to the sun very quickly. The collapse of the sword formation has ended. Zhao Liu calculated the time and said to Jingjiu, "The fleet should be here soon." Jingjiu said nothing. Looking at this scene, everyone was at a loss of what to do. His body was like a house full of holes. He could only let the cold wind pass through. The childlike spirit was like a lamp in the house, holding on in the cold wind. Now the house could collapse at any time, and the lamp oil was running out. How could they keep the flame alive? "Let's make a hot pot," Jingjiu suddenly said, "since we still have to wait for a while." Zhu said in surprise, "I didn't know that you liked to eat hot pot before. Did your temperament change after ascending?" "No. Even if you want to eat, how can you eat now? Whatever you eat will come out of your stomach." Zhao Liu glared at him. Jingjiu said, "I want to see you eat." Regardless of whether it was the last meal before his death, or he really just wanted to watch, since he had made the request, his disciples could only do it, and they had to do it beautifully. Zhu moved a table and a chair out of the manor cave. He also got some seasonings and food ingredients from somewhere. Lu Shui went to the forest in the depth of the island and picked some fresh mushrooms and vegetables. Enching stood by the seaside, lost in thought. Xin Yunmai stood by the pond, thinking about his father. Huaxi sat on the small stool and started to fish expressionlessly. Zhao Lei was talking to Jing Jiao in a low voice by the wheelchair, but her spiritual awareness was fixed on Zhao Lei the whole time. It didn't take long for everything to be prepared. Lu Shui snapped his fingers, and a devil flame gathered at the bottom of the pot, giving off a steady stream of heat. Zhuo Rizhui cut the coconut into pieces and boiled it with clean water. Then he added the coconut juice. Gradually, a sweet and fragrant aroma came out. Seeing that Huaxi had caught a few fish, Zhao Lei said, "I'll ask her for some." Thinking of the scene where the heads of Shun Aoyima and Shun Yunmai were floating in the pond, the group shook their heads. Zhao Lei said, "Do you want to boil the mushrooms in clean water? It won't look good." This hot pot was not meant to be eaten, but to be seen. Therefore, it was important to look good. Peng Lang flew out of the ocean along with a few sword lights, carrying a large number of lobsters and crabs in his hands. Zhuo Rizhui said hastily, as if he had just been granted amnesty, "The coconut seafood hot pot looks very refreshing. You will definitely like it." As soon as the soup in the pot started to boil, the clouds in the sky started to boil as well. The scorching sun battleship broke through the clouds and landed, bringing a strong wind and restlessness to the surface of the planet that had just calmed down. The battleship didn't land on the surface of the ocean. A dozen green lights flashed by, and some people appeared on the beach. They were the ferrymen who had been brought here from Mars by the scorching sun battleship. The ferry Swordenshin went up to meet them. He joined the godly taskmaster and the others and started narrating everything that had happened here. Cain Yang and the others naturally went to the hot pot table. When they saw Jing Jiao's current appearance, they cried out in surprise. The godly taskmaster and the other ferrymen of the previous generations confirmed the death of their first master, feeling extremely shocked and sad. The seaside was as quiet as a tomb. The surprised cries and chatter around the hot pot table were a bit ear-piercing. The ferryman in black looked in that direction and asked expressionlessly, "Are they celebrating? What is there to celebrate for them?" Enching said sentimentally while looking in that direction. Cain Yang and the others were surrounding the wheelchair. There was a deep wound starting from the corner of Jing Jiao's left eye, passing through his face and neck, and continuing downwards. His once flawless face looked a bit terrifying now. He looked like a dead man covered with the tattered 10,000 soul banner. "Yes, what can we celebrate? I'm not dead yet. Don't cry for me," Jing Jiao said impatiently. "Go and eat your food." Zhao Lei didn't eat anything, but just looked at him. Tong Yin didn't do anything, nor did she intend to eat anything. She sat under a coconut tree and rested. Cain Yang and the others didn't dare to disobey. They picked up their bowls and chopsticks, and the table became crowded. Over the last several hundred years, Suzai had always considered himself a direct descendant of the Shima Peak. He called Zhao Lei young lady whenever he saw her. He had enjoyed a few hot pot meals in the Shima Peak and joined in the crowd. But he would glance at Jing Jiao from time to time, thinking that the 10,000 soul banner couldn't be taken away even if it hadn't been destroyed, and the young lady would have it buried with Jing Jiao. The soup in the pot boiled incessantly, giving rise to a mist that dissipated before it could enter the clouds. The disciples kept on eating the dishes cooked by Lu Shui with the chopsticks in their hands. Apart from the fact that they didn't talk much and the atmosphere wasn't very lively, the scene was similar to the hot pot meals in the Shima Peak. Those immortals of the previous generations didn't know that the hot pot meals in the Shima Peak were usually not to celebrate a significant achievement, but rather a habitual action before a significant achievement, such as the civil strife in Aoyama, Jing Jiao's ascension, or his imminent death. As they were eating, they suddenly found another person had joined them. It was unclear when Huaxi had squeezed into the crowd. She sat on a chair and picked up some food with her chopsticks silently. "Shinaoyama has just died. How can you eat that much?" Suzai exclaimed in surprise. "And everybody else is standing. Why are you sitting here? Hua, she didn't pay any attention to him. She kept on putting food in her mouth. She was a regular person at the moment, and she almost choked when she was eating too fast. A pair of chopsticks reached over from the side, preventing her from picking up the food with her chopsticks. At the same time, a mild voice rang out. Slow down, slow down. The immortal Tan came to the table with the bowls and chopsticks in his hands. The crowd was astonished, wondering when he had come here. Tong Yin stood up under the coconut tree and bowed to the immortal Tan earnestly. The immortal Tan waved his chopsticks to indicate that he didn't need to come over, and sat on a chair brought over by Lu Shui. He was qualified to sit in the first seat, regardless of his status as the person who had contributed a great deal to the competition. After having a few mouthfuls of the lobster meat, the immortal Tan looked at Jingjio in the wheelchair and sighed. Then he ate some vegetables and couldn't help but sigh again. It was evident that he couldn't do anything about Jingjio's current situation. The hot pot was still boiling, and the atmosphere was still depressing. Rizhui couldn't stand it anymore. He turned around and yelled at the robot not far away. You're a disciple of Aoyama. Do you want to eat some of the hot pot? No, said Shinyamai. Rizhui said, I'm sorry for your loss. Everyone has to eat. My father has just died, and you people want to eat hot pot. I don't mind it, because it's considered a courtesy to eat at the grave. Shinyamai swore, but can I fucking eat anything? I don't want to see it, said Jingjio. Everyone's chopsticks stopped and looked at him. Jingjio said to Huashi, he said I should see something. This was what Shun Aoyama said before his death. After a moment of silence, Huashi said, in fact, there's nothing worth seeing, but you can see it if you want. Jingjio said, I think it should be on the ancestral planet. I can't go back to the main planet if I have to. Even the fastest battleship couldn't fly from the ancestral planet to the main planet in 9 days. His spiritual soul might be able to do it, but it was more likely that it would dissipate in the universe. I've placed one on every planet, so you can see him everywhere. Huashi put down her chopsticks and walked toward the manor cave. Zhao Liu followed her in the wheelchair. Many people guessed that the thing she took Jingjio to see must have something to do with deities. They were curious, but they didn't dare to follow her. Rizhui kicked Lu Shui and said, why don't you follow them and have a look? Come back and tell us. Lu Shui responded and hurried to follow them. 2 pairs of hands pushed the wheelchair into the manor cave and followed Huashi to a quiet room. The door of the quiet room was closed silently. The ground began to sink faster and faster. When the sinking stopped, Zhao Liu and Lu Shui figured out at the same time that they had reached a depth of 1,000 meters under the ground. The door of the quiet room was opened. They walked into the spacious cave. The dome and the 4 walls were made of stones, and there was no sign of human activity. A black box was placed among the stones on the ground. Huashi walked over and kicked the box rudely. Countless rays of light shot out from a box. The rays of light moved, intertwined, and merged. At last, a 3-dimensional image appeared. It was very lifelike, as if it were a living person. It was a young man wearing a military uniform from an unknown era. His appearance was very ordinary. His eyes were small with single eyelids. His eyebrows were very straight, and the ends of his eyebrows were slightly tilted like flying daggers. Zhao Liu and Lu Shui were a little surprised. Was this a deity? Chapter 10:30. Up until now, humans had never stopped imagining countless gods. Yet, this was the only one whose existence was documented. Even the immortals who ascended from Chaotian were curious about this god and had imagined him many times. It was the same for Zhao Liu and Lu Shui. Looking at the young officer, they couldn't help but feel surprised. If gods looked like this, wouldn't they be a little too ordinary? Huashi glanced at the young officer and turned to find a rock to sit on. It seemed that she was not interested in him. In fact, she often came to see him many years ago. However, she had seen him too many times and heard the same words over and over again, so she had to accept the fact. This person was not the real him. If that was the case, it was meaningless. The young officer shifted his gaze to the wheelchair and said with a smile, "Ask away." Jing Jiao said, "Introduce yourself." The young officer said, "My name is Su Lu. This year, I don't know how old I am. I was born in the Empire, and I was sent to the planet Donglin via the Bermuda Passage when I was a baby. I grew up there." Huashi added, "It's the moon-gazing planet where you people live for more than a year." The young officer named Su Lu said after a pause, "This is a good name change." Huashi yelled angrily, "I came here to tell you when I changed the name." Su Lu said after some thought, "Really? Maybe there is something wrong with the data." No matter how realistic the three-dimensional projection was, it was not a real person, but merely a stream of information. Jing Jiao said, "Tell me more about yourself." Su Lu continued, "My parents and younger sister in Donglin died in an accident, so I became an orphan. I met a teacher in an electronic repair shop. This god had already shown an extraordinary side when he was still immortal. It was not because of his identity as the crown prince of the empire, and it had nothing to do with his extraordinary experiences. It was because of his choices. Every choice he made was an interesting story. If he were to tell all the stories, he could write an essay of more than 3 million words. Of course, he could also tell them in a few paragraphs. It's a normal life of a hero." Jing Jiao made a simple summary of the situation. Su Lu said, "Yes, I think what I did was normal. It was the others who were abnormal." Lu Shui nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes." Su Lu looked at Lu Shui with a smile and continued, "That was all before I died. I would like to think that no matter if it's normal or abnormal, everything will return to tranquility with death. I never thought that I would have to think about what happens next." "How did you feel at the moment of your death?" Jing Jiao asked. Su Lu said, "Since I believe that everything will return to tranquility, I will naturally feel tranquil. The people I love have all died before me. I don't believe in heaven, and I hope to meet them again." "Yes," replied Jing Jiao. Su Lu said, "But I didn't expect that I wouldn't die." This sentence sounded very ordinary now. Thinking back to the specific scene at that time, it was extremely shocking. What could defeat the power of death? You've heard my previous story, so you know that my mind and consciousness have always been connected to the Charter Network. When I died, or to be precise, the moment my body died, my consciousness was suddenly transferred to the Charter Network. Su Lu said, "In other words, the Charter Network became my body, and Xiao Fei and I became the same existence." Huashi lowered her head and kicked a stone, mumbling, "How is it the same? I'm a girl." Su Lu smiled and continued, "You can imagine how panicked I was at that time." Zhao Liu said, "Didn't you feel lucky after surviving a disaster?" Su Lu probably hadn't heard this question before. He thought for a while and said, "I was still panicked. I did feel lucky, so I panicked even more. They were all dead, but I was still alive, and I was happy to be alive. This made me a little uncomfortable." This was a rather complicated question on the spiritual level. Jing Jiao understood and said, "Go on. Seeing my true self made me panic, and this form of existence also made me panic." Su Lu continued, "I thought for a long time about whether I was still me or not. After I understood this question, I slowly began to adapt to this form of existence. After I completely adapted, I began to think about the meaning of my existence and became very vigilant towards myself. So I swore to myself that I wouldn't do anything. The charter computer couldn't be physically operated, but he could. Huashi said that their forms of existence were different, but this was the real difference. He who lived in the glory of the charter as an ideology was not restricted by any rules. In a sense, as long as he wanted to, he could become a god. If a mortal suddenly found out that they had become a god, some might be ecstatic, some might go insane. Some would become very vigilant towards themselves, like Su Lu. A god who is not restrained could become a demon at any time. Being able to think of this and remain vigilant was probably the reason why he was able to become a god. Su Lu said, "The power of God and the boundless authority can easily intoxicate the consciousness of living beings like us. The more we use it, the more intoxicated we become. So, in the beginning, I really didn't do anything, regardless of whether the war between the Empire and the Federation would break out because of his death. Regardless of whether the dissolution of the HTD Bureau would cause an ecological disaster. Regardless of whether the reform of the Charter Bureau would bring about unimaginable problems. He was really prepared to do nothing. Silence was the only thing he could do. The problem was, forget it. That period of time, you couldn't bear it after only 3 days. Huashi said with a mocking expression, if you could bear it, how could it be you? Just because of a trivial matter, you started to operate physically without hesitation. You used the laser cannon of the battleship to flatten a small island in Linhai province. She didn't tell him what kind of unbearable tragedy had happened on that small island. Jingjiu didn't think it was important either. Cruel things could happen everywhere and could happen at any time. After the death of Su Lu, a human being, both the Federation and the Empire thought that they had gotten rid of his influence. Those things had gradually come to their senses. It's mainly because a friend of mine liked that small island a lot. Su Lu explained and then continued. Now that I've done one thing, let's continue to do it. In the end, I united the Empire and the Federation and changed the name to the Federation of the Milky Way. I know it's not a good name. The way he described it was quite interesting. From the small island to the unification of the Empire and the Federation, he had learned how to farm a moment ago and became the master of many planets the next moment. He omitted all the details. However, it was easy to imagine that the vicious cases in the Federation would decrease and the public security would be better after he started to show his power. Neither the remaining members of the 7 major families nor the followers of the Trinity Association could cause any trouble. After that, the Charter would advance toward the Empire. When the Empire was bathed in the Charter, it would gradually become one with the Federation. Bai Jin and the Huai family were like gods in the hearts of the Empire's populace. He was the first to become a god over there. Countless priests went to Bermuda, the Federation, and the Holy Land of Donglin along with the Charter to proclaim his miracles. He became the god of all humans. It only took him 1,300 years to achieve this. Chapter 10:31. I don't understand, Zhao Liu asked. There are so many things and so much information. How can you handle it all? I can, Su Lu replied. The person who had merged with the radiance of the Charter was an existence beyond human imagination. He was also different from the mechanical intelligence generated by the Charter computer. In a sense, he was indeed omniscient. And within the scope of the radiance of the Charter, he had the highest and unrestricted authority. He was indeed omnipotent. The entire world was under his control. From the battleships, mechas, crystal mines, laboratories, sanatoriums, and black market meat stalls, no one could resist his will. They could only choose to submit or die, and it would be difficult for them to die even if they wanted to. What's the difference between that and an emperor? Lu Shui lamented. Su Lu corrected, God has much more authority than an emperor, so you have to be careful. And then, Zhao Liu asked, next, I removed the rule that humans must be implanted with microchips at birth. That's what Uncle hates the most, and I don't like it either. I replaced it with a bracelet or some other device. It doesn't matter even if I don't implant it. I also carried out some social reforms, increasing Xiao Fei's authority but reducing the scope of the Charter. I also did some trivial things. Su Lu said, actually, I'm not good at these things. Most of the work is done by human experts and scholars, and then Xiao Fei helps me calculate and deduce. After confirming that there are no problems, I only need to say a few words. Jing Jiu agreed. That's how it should be for God. Zhao Liu and Lu Shui couldn't help but glance at him, thinking that he was the same when he was the master of Aoyama. I'm not saying that I have to do these things. Although it's what I want to do, it's still quite dangerous. Governing a country is not that simple, and a little carelessness can lead to great consequences. It's just that it's really boring. Su Lu said, at that time, I had learned all the knowledge I wanted to learn, but the research and development of the curvature spaceship still hadn't progressed. I had nothing else to do, and I had to do something, so I tried to do something good. Jing Jiu said, "You're a bit like Shui." Lu Shui didn't expect the young master to compare him to God. Even though he had been favored for many years, he was still shocked. Su Lu sensed the change in his emotions and asked, "You're only 10 years old?" Jing Jiu didn't give Lu Shui the chance to chat with him. He said, "Continue. The development of human science and technology is very fast, so fast that it exceeds the best expectations. This was related to me unlocking certain technologies, but it was mostly due to the development of human society itself. One year, I finally managed to build a spaceship that was fast enough. I took the star map that I had left behind and embarked on my first journey. I found the ancestral planet. Su Lu said, "The humans on the ancestral planet are all dead. The two uncles and my friend are long dead. The old thing is also dead. I only saw the remains of a robot here. It is said that it came from the first heyday of human civilization. It is very likely that it was the servant of the ancestor of the Hua family. The Hua family came to the empire from the ancestral planet. They are my ancestral family." After saying this, he was silent for a while. No one spoke to interrupt his thoughts, although everyone knew that his silence was not a reflection of his thoughts. That was the silence when the gods left behind this information stream. All right, let's briefly talk about the story of humanity in the past. Su Lu said, "This is very simple. The ancestral planet has experienced too many wars. When it was about to be destroyed, the two major forces of humanity began to flee. They built the Federation and the Empire in the distant alien planets." Zhao Liu thought of the war ruins on Mars and said softly, "What humanity can learn from history," Lu Shui said, "is that we can't learn anything from history." Su Lu smiled and said, "The thing I am most proud of is that I prevented humanity from stepping into this river again. Because I am a god, even if I can't solve all disputes, I can stop all wars. At least during those years. Those years were really many years. Humanity had enjoyed tens of thousands of years of peace. That was the happiest period of time. The problem is that humanity's desires have no limits, and neither do I." Su Lu said, "I had another friend, the one who died on the ancestral planet. He wanted to go to the edge of the universe and have a look when he was still alive. He said that the future of humanity lay in the sea of stars. I thought what he said was right. In order to relieve my loneliness, I started to develop the spaceship with the curvature drive or other methods of traveling through the galaxies." "The warped void?" Jing Jiu asked. Sula nodded and said, "Everybody thinks that the warped void is the perfect gift given to us by the universe. But I'm wondering why the humans are so lucky. I want to know the principle of the warped void. However, it is said that God will laugh when the humans are thinking. When I was thinking about this matter, it seemed that someone was laughing coldly in the dark, even though he was not a human, but a god at the time. Before his research could begin, a warped void at the edge of the left heaven suddenly collapsed, tearing open a space passage about 10 kilometers long in the universe, from which a great amount of invisible dark energy flowed out. The sea of dark matter had appeared in front of the humans. Sula didn't give any description of the encounter and what had happened afterward. He told the story to the end. "The humans have thought of many methods, and I have thought of many more methods to destroy the sea of dark matter." Su Lu continued, "But none of the methods worked. As such, I started to look for other methods. When the humans in the Federation of the Milky Way and himself couldn't think of any other methods, they had no choice but to seek outside help. He sent out many spaceships to travel around the universe, hoping to find an answer or some inspiration. Many years later, he found a patch of emptiness somewhere in the Milky Way. More and more spaceships gathered around that unremarkable white permanent star. Zhang Xinguang reached out a tentacle and set up dozens of large laboratories around the patch of emptiness. After a long time of research, he was certain that the patch of emptiness was not a transformed black hole, nor was it a celestial body existing in the universe. It was a world whose physical rules were different from those of the outside world. The difference in the laws of physics naturally formed an extremely firm boundary. Hearing this, Zhao Liu and Lu Shui knew that it was Chao Tian. After the cultivation practitioners in Chao Tian had ascended and learned the secrets of this world, they would look back at Chao Tian and come up with many conjectures. Like the conversation between General Li and Jing Jiao on the icy shell at the south pole of the main planet. Many evidences seem to indicate that Chao Tian was a laboratory created by the gods in the Ming Dynasty. It wasn't until the gods themselves disproved the theory. "I think it should be a prison of a more advanced civilization," said Su Lo. What did he mean by a prison of a more advanced civilization? Were those divine beasts of ancient times and the humans the prisoners of the prison? According to the experimental results, the spatial structure of the world of emptiness is quite peculiar, and it's not something the humans can imagine to use the different physical rules as a barrier. As such, I think it should be a world left behind by a more advanced civilization. Su Lu continued, "Everything must have a reason for its existence. Why did this advanced civilization leave behind such a world in our universe that was hard to break through? I think it should be used to imprison or restrain something." Zhao Liu thought that they had to go in and have a look to make sure of it. If it was indeed a prison, what I wanted to do was to escape from it in the opposite direction. I'm experienced in this aspect, and I've finally found a way to get in after a few decades. Sulu went on, "What I didn't expect was that the world and the emptiness was strange, barren, and exceedingly cold, devoid of any signs of life." Zhao Liu and Lu Shui eyed each other, thinking that this world was different from Chao Tian. "I found something in that world, but I didn't find any records or data of that advanced civilization. I've conducted many experiments and analyses, and I'm certain that the civilization appeared at least 700 million years ago. It should have been destroyed a long time ago, or it should have gone to a place we can't reach." After a moment of silence, Su Lu said, "Like the sea of dark matter." Zhao Liu asked, "Since it's a prison, there should be prisoners there." Shaking his head, Su Lu said, "There are no prisoners there. All I saw was a sleeping warden." The group guessed that he was referring to the Snow Girl. "That warden is a life completely different from ours. He is not entirely a program, not entirely an organism, and not entirely a consciousness. He seems to be a part of the prison, and he has the highest authority in this prison." Su Lu went on, "Fortunately, I found a way to control this warden in the beginning." Jing Jiao knew that the method Su Lu mentioned should be the thing hidden in the eye of the solar system formation by the Grandmasters. It was the thing that the Snow Girl was most afraid of. But why hadn't she found it and destroyed it in advance since it was in Chao Tian? Jing Jiao posed this question directly. Su Lu said, "I promised that I wouldn't tell anybody about it." Huashi sneered by the side. "He didn't even want to tell me, not even when he was dead." Jing Jiao had vaguely guessed something. Su Lu said, "I stayed in that world for a long time. You guys should be aware that time passes slower there. I suddenly had an idea one day. If the humans couldn't resist the invasion of a sea of dark matter, would we be able to move the humans here? It's because it looks like the sea of dark matter can't even get in here." This meant that he wanted to transform the prison into a fortress. Of course, the first step was to transform it. Su Lu continued, "The concept of space, the speed of light, and the speed of time in that world are different from ours. The advantage of that world is that it has a lot of time to use and can be transformed." Zhao Liu and Lu Shui thought that this was the reason. After a great many years, the cold and desolate prison had finally become the current Chao Tian. "What I'm concerned about is how you got in there and how you came out," asked Jing Jiao. This was the omitted part of the story, and it was the part that Zhao Liu and Lu Shui didn't pay attention to. Yet, it was the main point of the story for Jing Jiao. It was not difficult to enter the world of Chao Tian, as both Bai Run and that disgraced ferryman had proven. However, those who had gone back had a hard time coming out due to an unknown rule. God was omnipotent under the illumination of the charter, but why could he ignore the rule of the prison? Su Lu fixed his gaze on Jing Jiao and observed him for a long time. "You can think of it as a beam of light or a string, and then it converges into a specific form in a certain way," he said after observing him for a long time. It's a bit complicated to answer this question using words and formulas. If you try to enter that world, you should be able to figure out how to do it. This statement was a bit complicated and convoluted, probably having something to do with the unification of knowledge and action. How do you exist? Jing Jiu pressed. God was a consciousness, which was similar to a soul. Even though he had the illumination of the charter, how could he exist in Chaotian independently? Who was he outside Chaotian then? A part of the consciousness is all the consciousness, and the consciousness is more important. I'm different from little Fei in this regard. Sulu went on, of course, I'm very cautious about this. In order to ensure the uniqueness of my body, I've tried to build an information window on the boundary of the nothingness. In other words, I made a dog hole in the prison. Jingzhou thought it was probably the magic treasure of Zhongzhou school. There are many feelings and understandings that can't be explained in words, not even in mathematical language, Sulu said apologetically. I can't share too much with you. I hope I can help you. Jingzhou said, I still have a few days to think about it. Please continue. He was aware that this military officer named Su Lu was merely a projection and a piece of information stream, not the god himself. As such, he spoke straightforwardly. It wasn't until now that he added the word please to express his gratitude to the other party for sharing his experience. The sea of dark matter is on the verge of encircling the whole galaxy. The research and development of all kinds of technologies for traveling at the speed of light have reached a dead end, and the plan of migrating to the deep part of the universe has failed. All I can do is prepare for the final battle. Sulu continued, I've prepared two paths for the humans. The first one is to excavate the habitable planets at the edge of the galaxy and let the humans hide in the deep underground, hoping that they can survive the final explosion. The second one is to select a portion of the humans and other life forms to enter that world. There are also many modified animals, which are the byproducts of my research and dealing with the sea of dark matter. I hope that the new humans there can learn more and acquire more experience in fighting against the monsters of the sea of dark matter and even find a way to deal with them. It sounded like a few simple sentences, but it was a magnificent human epic many years ago. Many cruel and tragic stories must have taken place in that magnificent era. Who would stay? Who would leave? What were the criteria for selection? Who would make the decision? Who was qualified to make the decision? Looking at the expressions on Zhao Leiyu and Lu Shui, Su Lu said softly, it's all my decision. He was a god, so he should bear all the sins. Chapter 1032. Well, this is the last part of the story, said Su Lu. The sea of dark matter grew larger and larger. Countless mother nests and other monsters were marching toward the other side of the galaxy. After I made sure that all the preparations were done, I started the plan to ignite the star with a weapon of the star state I found in the prison. It seems to be a success, said Jingzhou. The Federation of the Milky Way and the Sea of Dark Matter perished together. Did you die as well? Asked Jingzhou. Yes, said Sulu. Jingzhou asked, was it because you wanted to control that weapon of the star state? Yes, said Sulu. After a moment of silence, Jingzhou asked, even though you knew that you might die? Sulu said calmly, that weapon needs a control program, just like the physical body needs a soul. It's hard to copy the control program of a high-level civilization. After searching for a long time, it seems that I'm the only one qualified to do it. Huaxi's cold voice rang out in the pile of rocks. I could have done it as well. Jingzhou didn't heed her and continued while looking at Su Lu. Did you turn off the computer of the charter to prevent her from stopping you? Yes, I knew what she would do, said Su Lu. But the process was more like hibernation. Jingzhou said while staring into his eyes in silence. So you died? Yes, said Su Lu with a faint smile after a moment of silence. I should be dead by now. When this young officer smiled, his eyes looked smaller, but they were full of energy. It was quiet in the cliff cave. Looking at Su Lu, Lu Shui felt a sense of admiration. Looking at Su Lu, Zhao Leiyu felt a sense of admiration. Looking at Su Lu, Jing Jiu suddenly felt sympathetic. "Do you know me?" he asked. "Of course. We've fought together." It seemed that Su Lu was worried that Jing Jiu would be displeased by what he said. So he added, "I meant your body, not your soul." "What is the all-in-one sword?" asked Jing Jiu. "Is it a weapon left by that civilization to guard the prison?" "All-in-one sword?" Su Lu asked curiously. "Is this the name you gave it?" Before Zhao Liu could explain anything, she heard him say in confusion, "I think I've heard this name before." Huashi raised her little face and said snappily, "Shinaoyama told you." "Oh, there might really be something wrong with the data collection system." Sulu looked at Jing Jiu and said, "I found some weapons and equipment in that prison at the beginning, and the strongest one was the all-in-one sword that you mentioned. I spent a long period of time researching and analyzing this weapon. I confirmed that it had an unprecedented level of power and an incomprehensible energy system. To put it simply, this weapon was stimulated by external energy, which allowed it to produce even more terrifying amounts of energy. This didn't go against the law of conservation of energy because some of the particles in the weapon would disappear. Those particles were the true key. The particles that made up the weapon were not elements of this universe. I'm certain that the prison was built by a civilization of a higher level, or even a civilization in the universe. The best evidence is this weapon, which is your body. If the magic treasure Zhongzhou School was the information window you had built, then what is the green sky mirror?" Jingjiu motioned for Zhao Liu to take out the green sky mirror. Sulu fixed his gaze on the green sky mirror. It didn't take long for him to recognize it, saying, "This is a device in that prison or a small dark room. It should be used to imprison those troublesome criminals alone." Looking at the complicated patterns on the green sky mirror and thinking of the people living in it, Jing Jiu thought that this was the case. "This is all I know," said Sulu. "The barrier of that prison is indeed very strong. The sea of dark matter can't get in even now." Zhao Liu went on, "But those humans you put in there have a hard time coming out as well. Since the ancient times, many cultivation practitioners had cultivated arduously in an attempt to attain the Tao and ascend, but few of them had succeeded. The vast majority of humans were born and died here, repeating the same process over and over again. They had no idea that there was a higher world out there, and that that place was the real hometown of the humans. I had thought it through when I made this plan back then. If the humans there could evolve to a very powerful level and break through the barrier and return to the real universe, they would have a chance to defeat the sea of dark matter." Su Lu continued, "If they couldn't break through the barrier, it meant that they were not powerful enough. It would be meaningless for them to come out. It would be better for them to stay in that world. At least they could survive." General Lee had a similar conjecture, and it looked like he was right. "You know that staying alive is the most important thing. But why did you choose to die at the time?" Huashi said this while hugging her knees. It was unclear if she thought of Shan Oyama's death a moment ago or Su Li's death tens of thousands of years ago. She started sobbing. Seeing this, Zhao Liu and Lu Shui didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence, Su Lu said, "Well, this is the end of my story. You're a good person." Jing Jiu repeated this, and then asked, "If you were still alive, would you regret your choice?" "I've asked myself this question many times before I made that choice." Sulu went on, "I would make the same choice. If I could relive my life, I would do the same thing." Jing Jiu understood it well, so he didn't ask why. Sulu didn't wait for Jing Jiu to ask again and started talking about something else. Judging from this detail, Jing Jiu had been prepared to answer this question when he set up the information flow. It didn't matter if the person who raised the question was a young woman named Faye or a human descendant he didn't know. "I've lived for tens of thousands of years, and so has little Faye. We've experienced many things, played many roles, and received a great deal of information. The information and the passage of time can indeed obscure the most profound memories. Sometimes I forget what the women I love look like, and sometimes I can't remember the brands of cigarettes my friends like to smoke. In my long life, I've loved many other people, but I'm still used to wearing a military uniform, and she still likes to wear a dress and cut her bangs neatly like fireworks. Why? Su Lu said, because it doesn't matter when we die, but when we live is more important. Little Faye was born during that time, and so was I. It's the women I love, the water in the bathtub, the flowers in front of the tombstones, the holes in the snow, the little girls on TV, my friends, those cigarettes, those gun barrels that made me who I am. This was a very easy sentence to understand. He didn't want to forget. In fact, he hadn't forgotten. That was when he lived in the name of Su Lu. Living in the name of God was an entirely different matter. And it's very boring. Su Lu looked at him and said seriously, looking at the universe from God's point of view, you'll feel like you're really God, or you're playing a game, and you can overturn it at any time. It's very scary. Of course it was very scary. One didn't fear death when playing a game. How many people would die in a game that couldn't be loaded and could only be restarted? And those people weren't the NPCs in the game. They were the real lives. The unification of the Federation and the Empire can eliminate the wars and reduce the number of deaths. But how many people have I killed in the process? As you've been a god for a long time, you've become more and more fearless of death. Su Lu continued while staring at Jingjio. If things go on like this, I don't even know what kind of being I'll become in the end. Sometimes I even feel grateful to the sea of dark matter. Otherwise, I might become the person I hated the most. He said all this to Jingjio. He was fully aware that Jingjio was his successor. If Jingjio didn't die, he would become the new god. Don't worry. The paths we've chosen are different, said Jingjio. Su Lu said after some thought, well, not everybody is like me who likes to worry about everything. Having said that, the light faded away, and the young officer vanished in the air. Huashi stood up from the pile of rocks. Zhao Leiyu and Lu Shisui hadn't gotten rid of their emotions yet. They were still looking at the spot where Su Lu had stood. A moment later, the light rays shot out from the black box again, forming Su Li's appearance again. Looking at Jingjio in the wheelchair, Jingjio said with a faint smile, ask away. He had returned to the beginning. He was merely a piece of information flow. Let's go, said Jingjio. Zhao Leiyu and Lu Shisui pulled themselves together and pushed the wheelchair toward the outside. Huashi suddenly picked up a stone and threw it at Su Li's projection. The stone passed through the light and shadow and landed on a distant rock, giving off a crisp sound. Chapter 1033. It was deathly quiet in the quiet room. The ground rose slowly. Leaning against the wheelchair, Jingjio was thinking of many things. What was that god thinking when he entered the all-in-one sword and headed toward those permanent stars? How could he get rid of the all-in-one sword now? It seemed that he had to ask the snow girl about that prison and the missing high-level civilization. Even though she was merely a guard and didn't know much about the main body of that civilization, she should know something. The door of the quiet room was opened, and the group walked out. As they left the manor cave, they found the sky was dark. The conversation didn't last long, so it shouldn't be night yet. It was the sun that had been blocked. The patch of darkness grew larger, and the light on the small island grew dimmer. The ocean wind whistled, and the ocean sprays rolled in all directions. As the patch of darkness fell to the surface of the ocean, the group found it was a patch of clouds. Ada had received the message from Qing, and flew back from the distant sun. The dead dog was lying on his back. He was of an average size, covered with bloody scars, looking like a black and red gem. In the past, Ada had always been lying on the back of the dead dog, but it was the other way around. The snow girl sat on the head of Ada with her eyes closed. She looked extremely weak, like a grain of rice. Qing flew back to Zhao Leiyu's shoulder, saying, I don't think they'll die. Ada shook his body, his long hair swaying like the silk of the clouds, and returned to his usual size. The dead dog landed on the beach. A hint of sadness showed in his eyes. It was unclear if it was because he had smelled the scent of the great Grandmaster. Then, he looked at Jingjio and lowered his head to bow to him. Jingjio straightened his broken body and returned the bow earnestly. The expression in the dead dog's eyes grew tranquil and warm. He turned around and walked toward the ocean. Soon, he disappeared into the blue ocean, and it was unclear where he had gone. He went to recuperate, said Jingjio. Ada jumped onto Jingjio's knee lightly and lifted his head. He didn't act arrogantly, nor did he ask for praise or a pat on the head. He was returning something. Cold Cicada loosened its armored leg and let go of the small hollow ball made of golden threads. It didn't even dare to look at the snow girl. Its countless eyes were filled with fear. Jingjiu took the gold-threaded hollow ball and looked at the black gem inside. His eyes were extremely calm. Only then did Ada notice his current situation. His pupils constricted, and he meowed a few times hurriedly. "Are you going to die?" Jingjiu was still looking at the black gem and casually replied, "By definition, yes." Ada was silent for a long time and meowed a few times in a low voice. "I was most afraid of you two in my life, and I was bullied the most by you two. When I was at Bihu Peak, I prayed for you two to die every night. Then Taiping Jinren died, and now you're going to die too. I should be happy, but why am I so sad all of a sudden? Oh, right, there's a black monument on the other side of the sun. Maybe it can save you. No one can save him. I can't, and that thing can't either." A young and weak voice suddenly rang out on the beach. Everyone looked over and was shocked to find that it was Xue Jie who was speaking. The immortals of the previous generations didn't even know that the queen could speak the human language. Zhuo Ruzhui and the others remembered that many years ago, when the Xue Jie killed by Run and ascended, she seemed to have said something. At that time, she seemed to have said, "I'll never come back." I'll deal with it myself," said Jingjio. The Xue Jie asked emotionlessly, "What are you going to do with me?" She was in an extremely weak state at the moment. Any immortal could kill her. Most importantly, she didn't have a way to restrain Jingjio. The first master of Aoyama was dead, and Jingjio was no longer controlled by the inherited heaven sword. Instead, he could use that thing to control her. Though they did have an agreement, the problem was Jingjio was going to die. Who knew what he would do for the human race? Everyone fixed their eyes on Jingjio's hand. The gold-threaded hollow ball in his hand was the key to the Xue Jie's life. Those eyes had different meanings. Kill her. Control her. Don't. All things are used by humans. It sounds reasonable, but isn't that what all things hate the most? Jingjio ended his meditation and retrieved his spiritual awareness. He handed the gold-threaded ball to the Xue Jie. Seeing this, everyone was shocked speechless. After a moment of silence, the Xue Jie reached out her two small hands and held the ball with both of her hands. Jingjio looked at her with a smile and said nothing. The next moment, the golden thread broke and scattered on the beach. The black gem that was restrained by the formation had disappeared. The Xue Jie must have put away. Her eyes became deeper and darker, and anyone who looked at them would feel fear. The Xue Jie looked up at the sky and laughed soundlessly. The two ends of the red line on her face curled up slightly, which immediately diluted the pressure and fear. The black obelisk was the only existence in this universe that could threaten her, and now it was under her control. She had finally obtained the freedom she wanted the most. After a moment, she retrieved her gaze and looked at Jingjio in silence. Everyone knew what she meant. Her seemingly simple and pure, yet dreadful eyes were full of complicated emotions. From now on, no matter what Jingjio asked her to do, she would say, "I'm willing," even if it meant destroying the world. "I'd like to ask you something," said Jingjio. As his eyes met the Xue Jie's, he felt as if he had gone back many years. Back when he participated in the cultivation tournament of the Plum Meeting, he was forced to go deep into the snowland with Baizeo because of low Huainan and was trapped in the extremely cold environment. The Xue Jie's spiritual awareness came over from the distant icy peak and landed on him. It was the same today. When their spiritual awareness met, they exchanged a great deal of information. The Xue Jie had no idea what the advanced civilization that built that prison was like. She was born or created in that prison the day she was born. According to the requirement of her authority, she couldn't contact the prisoners in the prison. As such, she could only look at the world in the north. She felt lonely and bored, so she started to think about the meaning of her existence. The moment of being started to think about the meaning of her existence, the first thing she wanted to do was to understand the world she was in. She didn't know about that advanced civilization, but she was sure that there was another world outside the sky. As such, she thought that her origin was in that world, and those powerful prisoners were exiled to this world by that world. This isolated world was indeed meaningless. She had tried to leave this world, but she couldn't find a way to do so. She had to spend most of her time in hibernation until all the prisoners in the prison were killed by time. After a long hibernation, a being who claimed to be a god came to that world. He somehow found a way to control her and then reached an agreement with her, just like what Jingjio had done. What kind of person was that god at that time? I didn't see him in person, but you two communicated with each other. In the human language, that god was a bit shy, and he was apologetic for no reason. That god did things in an inexplicable way. Thinking of the conversation he had with Su Lu, Jingjio thought with an inexplicable sadness. The soup in the hot pot had been dried up by the devil fire, but it wasn't burned. The last conversation between Jingjio and the snow girl came to an end. She turned around and walked toward the ocean. An island emerged on the surface of the ocean in the distance. It was the back of the dead dog. The snow girl was going to recuperate in the ocean. Everybody knew that she and the dead dog had gone through thick and thin together, so they had a good relationship. The news of the death of the Grand Master of Aoyama was still blocked on the ancestral planet. The ferrymen in the distant universe didn't know about it yet, but they should have made some preparations in advance. Yet, nobody had the intention to leave, including Tong Yen. Everybody was waiting for Jingjio to solve his problem or die. The ferrymen of the previous generations, like the godly striker master and Mr. Dong, who were still immersed in the sorrow, were not allowed to leave. Countless battleships had taken control of the solar system, and anyone who tried to escape would suffer a dreadful attack. We didn't want to leave in the first place, the godly striker master said expressionlessly. The pair of devilmen in black spoke at the same time, but what they said was completely different. Guz was stared at Jingjio and said icily, "We want to see you die with our own eyes." Guyu said expressionlessly, "Since the Grandmaster is dead, you can't die." The latter statement was the true thought of the ferrymen of the previous generations. The underlying meaning was clear. The Grandmaster of Aoyama didn't have a personal grudge against you. What they were fighting for was the direction of the path toward heaven. Now that he had proven himself wrong with his death, you had to solve the problem facing the humans. Jingjio didn't respond to him, but motioned for Zhao Liu to push him to the seashore. The shadow of the wheelchair was dragged far away by the setting sun in the coconut grove. There is one thing that you might not know yet. Zhao Liu took out the green sky mirror again and said, "Some of the people here are dead, but they are still alive." She had told Chao Yuan about it by the lake on the snowy mountain on that planet. Jingjio was not surprised. As he said, the abnormality of the green sky mirror started many years ago. During the Dao competition at the Zhongzhou school, he won the tripod in the green sky mirror and helped Qing find her way to freedom. It was then that the green sky mirror experienced some inexplicable changes. The time in that world had slowed down, and the ghostly figures could be seen in the royal palace of Zhaozhao. You didn't know what had happened back then, Qing said while sitting on Zhao Liu's shoulder. "I'll go and have a look," said Jingjio. Lu Shui, who had disappeared earlier, walked out from the deep end of the coconut grove, holding a large bundle of bamboos. The group was used to him finding bamboos wherever he went, so they were not surprised to see him. He used a lone sword with all his might, and the sword lights flashed. He had finished cutting the bamboos in the shortest time possible. Lu Shui made a bamboo chair skillfully, and then polished it with a huanchi yarn. Yuan Chu exclaimed in surprise, "You've even brought Hejan's belongings here. Sensei has always wanted to separate from the family. What could she do about it?" Lu Shui shot a glance at Zhao Liu, but didn't say anything. Zhao Liu didn't want to answer these boring questions. She picked up Jingjio and placed him on the bamboo chair carefully, using the green sky mirror as a pillow under his neck. Not bad, Jingjio commented satisfactorily. The ocean wind passed through the coconut grove and mixed with the sound of ocean waves nearby, which was suitable for calming the mind and mind. Those immortals of the previous generations were sitting cross-legged in the distance. It was unclear if they were still grieving. Zhao Liu and Lu Shisui stood by the bamboo chair, looking like two gatekeepers. Cain Yang intended to stay behind, but she was taken to the manor cave by Tong Yin, who told her that they would play chess there. Yuan Shu and young sister Yushan sat by the seashore, talking to each other while looking at the master dead dog who was getting further away. They were wondering if their young brother should come out and help them solve the problem, or take a look at him for the last time. The shabby robot sat by the pond again, fishing with the bamboo rod in his hand. The bamboo rod looked like a toothpick in his hand, and the pond was merely a small puddle of water. The Scorching Sun battleship had already exited the atmosphere a while ago and was cleaning up the area near the broken moon. Some images of the battleships could be vaguely seen in the distant space. Jingjio had fallen asleep on the bamboo chair with his eyes closed. Ada was afraid that Jingjio would feel pain, so he didn't lie in Jingjio's bosom. He curled up by Jingjio's side. The ancient times and the modern times. The history of mankind. The passage of time. All these seem to be concentrated in this scene. This was the first day. Chapter 1034. Chuzhou City was still as prosperous and lively as it had been hundreds of years ago. However, even those who lived here for generations rarely remembered that it used to be a capital city. That country was called the Great Chu, and it had a very strange last emperor. On the contrary, people would often think of the Grand Secretary Zhang and the Old Master Zhang, who was even more famous in unofficial history. The specific reason was that the Zhang family was still the most influential family in Chuzhou City, even in the whole world. It was said that the Zhang family was a gentleman. If the Old Master Zhang was not a gentleman, it could only be counted from his father, the Grand Secretary Zhang. It had been more than 10 generations, but the Zhang family was still so prosperous, which was an anomaly. Many people said that the Zhang family was blessed by gods, and some people in the Zhang family even said that they had seen the spirits of their ancestors. In this case, the Zhang family's ancestral hall was well maintained. However, the incense burner from hundreds of years ago had disappeared, so the smoke was gone. Many wells in the manor were also sealed. The red carp had moved from the well to the golden basin and then to the pond, and now lived in a big lake. The big lake was covered with mist, and the other side could not be seen in the rain. It was not hard to imagine how big the Zhang family was now. When the fire carp grew up, it was still powerful even though it was only a spirit, so it didn't need to be seen by mortals. Every morning after eating the morning dew, it would swim to the shore and keep swinging its tail as if it was performing for someone. An old man stood on the shore, looking at it with a perplexed look in his eyes. He seemed to be in a daze. The morning light shone on him, but it directly passed through him without leaving a shadow. The maids and servants of the Zhang family were busy carrying basins and tools by the lake, but no one looked at him. The breeze blew, and the lotus leaves trembled slightly. Jingjio landed on it. The fire carp looked at him and exclaimed, "Immortal, how did you come in? Did you also lose, and your body was taken away, so you had to hide in here with your spiritual soul? That old man is really too powerful. You should just stay here." The old Master Zhang suddenly became sober and scolded, "Who are you calling a bad old man?" Jingjio said to the fire carp, "The man you mentioned is dead." "Dead?" The fire carp was taken aback, and then said, "That's good." Looking at the old Master Zhang, who was still cursing, he said with a complicated expression in his eyes, "This guy died many years ago, but he didn't know it. He stands here every day like a fool." Old Master Zhang said angrily, "Stupid fish, who are you talking about? You're the one who died." He looked at Jingjio, who was standing on the lotus leaf, and said gloomily, "I seem to have seen you somewhere before, but I can't remember where." Jingjio landed in front of him and patted his shoulder. The incorporeal hand met his shoulder, but it brought about a gentle breeze. He picked up the breeze with his fingers, thought for a moment, and then went to the palace. Compared to a few hundred years ago, the palace had not changed much. However, without an emperor, there were naturally no more court meetings or state affairs. It had long since become a palace that no one cared about. Jing Jiao returned to his palace. Looking at the floor that still had some scratches, he pondered for a moment. He turned around and lit a lamp, though the lamp had run out of oil a long time ago. Next, he went to the royal palace of the state of Zhao. He saw the figure of the emperor again under the chestnut tree. The emperor did have a shadow. After a few hundred years, the ghostly energy of the emperor of the state of Zhao was much fainter, and he was on the verge of becoming an immortal. I don't know how I woke up, and I don't know if I'm still alive. The emperor of the state of Zhao looked as pale as when he was alive, asking, "Where's my wife? Will she come back after death?" "I don't know," replied Jing Jiao. After a moment of silence, the emperor of the state of Zhao asked, "What about Master Eunuch?" Jing Jiao said, "He is dead, and he can't come back." Having said that, he left the green sky mirror. After the green sky mirror left Chao Tian, the flow of time had evidently changed. When he opened his eyes and returned to the real world, the small island had already welcomed a new morning. "How is it?" asked Zhao Liu while staring into his eyes. "The soul can exist alone," Jing Jiao went on, "but the green sky mirror is a relatively closed system, and the total amount of existence inside it remains the same." Zhao Liu said, "Though this universe is expanding, it's still a relatively closed system." What she meant was that the soul could exist in the green sky mirror, and it should be able to exist here as well. "You've forgotten about the sea of dark matter," said Jing Jiao. This remark made the coconut grove quiet down. The ocean waves lapped against the beach softly, not daring to make too much noise. A robot walked over in the morning sunlight. "You have to stay alive. Of course, it's not for the sake of saving the humans." Shen Yunmai recovered from the emotion he had experienced the day before and resumed his usual casual tone. "But it would be a waste if all of us died." Jing Jiao agreed with Shen Yunmai's opinion, saying, "But this body can't hold on." The robot bent over, and the door of the control room opened, exposing Shen Yunmai's face. He stared into Jing Jiao's eyes and said, "Do you know what you're saying? You're not that kind of person. Can't you be a bit braver?" After a moment of silence, Jing Jiao said, "Babies are very curious, but they're also afraid of the dark." It was then that Tong Yin and Kei Nyang walked out from the manor cave, bringing a go board to the seashore. The go board was densely covered with the black and white go pieces, forming a picture with a hidden principle. There's a kind of soul-binding formation in the alien land. Kei Nyang and I have studied it and found some inspiration. Tong Yin said while pointing to the go pieces, "We can set up a similar formation. By absorbing the energy from the remaining center of the formation, your soul won't have to worry about dissipating in the next 10 years. Jing Jiao knew that this formation would be useful. "I'd rather go to the green sky mirror," he said while shaking his head. Tong Yin said, "You know it's different." Jing Jiao said calmly, "I don't want to give up." "Beautiful," Shen Yunmai praised loudly. Now that the child had taken the first step as a human on the beach, he had no choice but to move forward instead of retreating. "Do you have a lamp?" asked Jing Jiao while looking at Lu Shui. Lu Shui fumbled with the lamp for a while and took out an ancient bronze lamp. The immortals of the previous generations who had been paying attention to the commotion became restless. The godly abuser exclaimed with a terrible expression, "How come the staunch lamp of our sect is in your hands?" Lu Shui didn't know how to explain it, so he looked at Zhao Liu again. Zhao Liu said, "It was given to me by the king of boats of Penglai. If you have any objections, you can ask him when he ascends." Jing Jiao raised his right hand slowly and snapped his fingers with the remaining 3 fingers. "Huh!" A small flame appeared on the bronze lamp. The sound was not loud, but it woke up Ada, who was sleeping while curling up into a ball. Ada suddenly felt a warmth on his body. He turned around and found a child was crouching by his side, stroking him. This was the first time he had seen Jing Jio's spiritual soul. He was startled and meowed a few times. The stroking of the spiritual soul was not a real contact. He couldn't feel the smoothness of the cat's fur. The child stood up disappointedly. He folded his hands behind his back, which were not as blurry and transparent as they were the day before. It was unclear whether it was because he had rested in his body for a while or because he had rested in the green sky mirror. "What are you going to do?" Zhao Liu sensed his intention to leave, feeling a bit nervous. "I want to learn how to stroke a cat. I'll be back in a few days." Having said that, Jingjiu disappeared from the original spot. Nobody, including Zhao Liu, Lu Shui, and the immortals on the island, noticed how Jingjiu had disappeared, nor did they know where he had gone. Shen Yunmai suddenly yelled, "Keep your eyes on that lamp." It was then that the people realized what Jingjiu intended to do. Zhui Ruzhui appeared out of nowhere. He waved his hand to set up the inherited heaven sword formation, protecting the bronze lamp in the middle. In the next moment, Tong Yin and Cain Yang set up 2 more formations outside the lamp. Everyone's gazes fell on the bronze lamp. To be more precise, their gazes fell on that wisp of flame. It should be Jing Jiu's soul fire. It was the mark he left behind to help him find his way back. For some reason, the flame was still swaying incessantly even though it was protected by the formation. Where did the wind come from? The crowd felt very nervous. What would it mean if the flame was extinguished? A patch of rocks appeared in front of them. It was the shale. The scene was zoomed in. The grayish-green color turned into something smaller. They saw the crystals. They saw the molecules. They saw the smaller ones. Finally, they saw the particles. The traces of the particles were like the flowing light, but they were untraceable. There was the will of the formation ahead. It turned out that the will of the formation could be seen. Everything in front of them was being cut into smaller pieces. It was not a scene that could be seen by the naked eye. He was no longer an ordinary life form at this moment. This was a completely different method of perception. If he were an ordinary human being, he would be bewildered or even crazy when he saw the world being divided into atoms or even smaller particles in front of him. Fortunately, this method of perception was similar to the divine sense, so he could adapt to it. He had no sense of direction. When he was walking toward Shinaoyama on the beach, he found that he could not feel the gravitational force. There was no direction in the world without gravity. It was like deep space. It seemed that his consciousness itself could help him find the direction. Those particles that had been cut into pieces passed through his vision and body, if he still had a body, and he who was going against the current also passed through the matter made up of those particles and kept moving forward. In other words, the material world could not stop him from traveling at will. He traveled at will on this planet. Out of caution, he did not go deep into the hottest region of the planet's core, but only walked in the crust. In those layers of rock, he found a lot of underground spaces, as well as many ruins from the early days of humanity. Whether it was those ruins or the database that Shinaoyama had organized, none of them could make him pause for even a moment. The gods told him that it was important to know when to be born, which meant that he needed to know when to start. He admitted that there was some truth to this, but he was more used to looking forward and moving forward. In just a few seconds, he had circled around this planet 3 times. There was a strange energy fluctuation at the bottom of the sea in front of him. With a slight thought, he appeared in that place. Stone slabs were scattered on the ground, soaked in seawater. Countless black tablets were either tilted or fallen. He knew that this was the core of the solar system sword array. He retracted his consciousness. Child appeared on top of those black tablets. The seawater began to move, forming countless turbulent currents. Blue arcs of electricity flowed from one tablet to another, becoming brighter and brighter. Child opened his arms. Countless arcs of electricity left the black tablets and entered his body. After an unknown amount of time, the blue arcs of electricity disappeared. The black tablets had completely died, becoming tombstones. As he sensed the meaning of the blue arcs of electricity, he faintly understood something. A soul doesn't have a body, only consciousness. To communicate with this world, to touch a cat, he had to get used to using his senses. In Aoyama's words, he wanted to. He closed his eyes and began to sense this world, heading towards different parts of the planet. It wasn't just his inner sense that was spreading, but rather his own body that was growing. As time passed, his senses spread throughout the entire planet. In other words, the entire planet was in his embrace. The coconut grove, the sea breeze, the morning sun. It was a beautiful scene, but because of the tense atmosphere, it was a bit strange. Everyone was staring at the lamp. Zhao Liu, Tong Yin, and Zhuo Ruzhui were staring at the heavenly beings of the past. A light breeze blew past, caressing everyone's faces. Everyone sensed that something was amiss and turned to look. Some were looking at the sky, some were looking at the ocean. No one knew where the wind was coming from, so they all felt different. Some felt warm, some felt cold, some felt lazy. Some felt that he had gone further away. On the first day, he learned to walk. On the second day, he learned to communicate with the world around him. The communication here wasn't as simple as talking, but rather the exchange of information, and the method was different from any other information exchange in the universe. At this point, he had already arrived in front of the sun. As he looked down at the gigantic ball of fire, he remembered a few things. He had been to another sun and walked on its surface. Even if the temperature on the surface of a star wasn't too high, heavenly beings would still find it difficult to survive on it. He was special in the past, and even more so now. He drifted towards the sun, getting closer and closer, even passing through an extremely high-temperature jet stream. There were no problems until they entered a certain area. Only then did some changes occur. An extremely thin ionosphere appeared around him. Did the world sense his presence? No. He began to extend his senses again. Not too long after, his range of perception had expanded to an unimaginable degree, enveloping the entire sun. Then came the retraction. He arrived on the other side of the sun. Is this another form of transmigration? Then he saw the black obelisk. Chapter 1035. Jingjiu looked at the steel in silence. It meant that his perception was on it. After an unknown period of time, he confirmed some things. The things left by the advanced civilization had no influence on the universe, except the things of the advanced civilization. In other words, if he were still the Jingjiu, he would be swallowed by the black steel. Shinaoyama hadn't thought of this because he hadn't experimented with it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been lured into the trap. If the all-in-one sword had been swallowed by the black steel, his plan would have been in vain. He suddenly thought of the snow girl's description. This black steel could expand infinitely, and it couldn't affect the universe. From these 2 points, it was somewhat similar to his current state. After a long while, he turned his gaze away from the black steel and flew toward the sun again. This time, he didn't take a detour like before, but flew straight into it. It was unclear what the black steel had given him, confidence or a new understanding. Soon after, he flew out from the other side of the sun. Neither the hot and scorching flow of particles nor the violent energy reaction had any influence on him. He should be the first intelligent being to penetrate the fixed star after that god. The people on the blue planet were still staring at the light. He didn't stop. He flew past the densely packed battleships and headed toward the outside of the solar system. On the third day, he had learned to locate his position in the universe. A dozen galaxies were scattered on the periphery of the local galaxy group. These galaxies were not included in the catalog of the Astronomical Bureau of the Federation of the Milky Way. They were still the most secretive ones, because they were the experimental planets of the immortals. On the planet covered with snowy mountains and grasslands, everyone was kneeling on the ground, looking at the distant snowy mountains with fear and bewilderment on their faces, regardless of whether it was the majestic imperial capital or the villages and tribes scattered in the fields. The people of the Buddha land had a firm belief, and those sadhu could step into the sky by relying on their willpower. However, what could they do when they found 2 Buddhas fighting against each other? Half of the side ridge of the tallest snowy mountain had collapsed, indicating the intensity of the previous fight. On the top of the snowy mountain, Happy Monk sat paralyzed on the Grand Nirvana. His face was haggard and thin, and he was no longer as handsome as before. His monk robe was tattered, and there were wounds all over his body, from which black gas faintly overflowed. He looked extremely miserable. Chow Yuan looked at him expressionlessly while holding the iron broadsword. The pursuit that began in the Scorpion Tail Nebula was long and bloody. The joyful monk employed all his methods and incarnations, but he still couldn't get rid of Chow Yuan. The wounds left on his body by Lu Shui started to break out. He had no choice but to resort to the last method, which was to return to the Buddha land. Chow Yuan was the true Buddha of this world. Many monks and believers came forward to stop him. The joyful monk thought that Chow Yuan, like himself, had guarded the snowland for many years and had a benevolent intention, so it would be hard for Chow Yuan to kill the populace. He thought that Chow Yuan might be able to stop Chow Yuan for a while, but unexpectedly, Chow Yuan attacked him mercilessly. The iron saber had cut through heaven and earth, killing countless monks and believers. The bottom of the snowy mountain was dyed red with blood, and there were hundreds of corpses lying on the ground. It was an exceptionally glaring sight. "I thought you wouldn't make a move." Happy Monk looked at him and said in a hoarse voice. Chow Yuan said, "Now that I can ascend, I've thought it through." The joyful monk had read the book, so he knew that it was Jing Jiao who told him this. He couldn't help but let out a faint mocking smile. Chow Yuan had killed those regular believers and monks, so he was not a pedantic person. Yet, for some reason, he didn't swing his iron broadsword at the joyful monk who was severely wounded and on the verge of death. "It looks like the ice cream with strawberry jam on it." A voice rang out on the top of the snowy mountain. The voice was calm, but it gave off a gloomy, ghostly aura as it described the snowy mountain full of blood. The weirdest part was that nothing had changed on the snowy mountain or in the air, so where did the voice come from? Chow Yuan and the joyful monk looked around, but they didn't see anything. The natural light dimmed a bit, forming a child. Seeing the blurred eyes and eyebrows of the child, Chow Yuan suddenly realized something and was stunned speechless. The joyful monk also recognized who the child was, revealing an expression that looked like a smile and a cry. He raised his hand with difficulty, as if he wanted to touch the child, and said in a trembling voice, "You've indeed chosen this path, and you think I'm right, don't you?" Jing Jiao didn't pay attention to him, and said to Chow Yuan, "Shun Aoyama is dead." "When did it happen?" Chow Yuan asked in surprise. 3 days ago." Chow Yuan and the joyful monk were even more startled, thinking that it took him only 3 days to get here despite the distance of the ancestral planet and the vastness of the universe. Could it be that his spiritual soul could travel faster than the speed of light? If they knew that Jing Jiao had just set off from there, they would be even more startled. The extension of awareness is different from the transmission of information. You can reach wherever you want, and all you need to do is think about it, said Jing Jiao. The joyful monk slapped his thigh twice forcefully, ignoring his injury, and said to Chow Yuan, "You see, I'm right. Why didn't you kill him?" Jing Jiao asked Chow Yuan. Chow Yuan said, "The beings in the great nirvana are controlled by his Zen will." It turned out that the joyful monk had used those beings as hostages. "I'm about to enter the great nirvana," said Jing Jiao. No sooner had he said this than a gust of gentle wind whipped up on the top of the snowy mountain. The gentle wind felt a bit chilly on his face. The joyful monk shivered, and his haggard face had gradually regained its handsome look. He sensed something was not right. He lowered his head to look at his body and let out a strange sound that was either a cry or a laugh. A moment later, he calmed down and said sentimentally, "So this is how it feels." Then he said, "Yes." It seemed that he was talking to himself, but he was actually answering. The joyful monk closed his eyes and lowered his head slowly. He died just like that. Chow Yuan put down the iron broadsword in his hand and bowed with his palms pressed together. The gentle wind entered the great nirvana. The stained surface of the great nirvana suddenly became clean, and the black and golden squares were very eye-catching. The body of the joyful monk turned into golden sand and landed on the surface of the great nirvana. It was rumored that there were 3,000 worlds in the great nirvana. The gentle wind traveled among them. Soon, it was clear that there were only over 70 small worlds. The sizes of those worlds were different, the number of inhabitants was different, and the social patterns and environments were also different. The only similarity was that the people living in those worlds were all souls, living like slaves under the will of the heavenly way. They had to struggle to survive all year round and then die. Their souls wandered among the worlds as if there was no end. The heavenly way was dead at the moment, and the cycle of reincarnation was no more. There was no voice announcing freedom, only the gentle wind passing by. The slaves of over 70 worlds stood in the wilderness, on the high mountains and by the mines, looking at the sky blankly with bewildered expressions in their eyes. All of a sudden, countless golden flowers fell down from the sky. The expressions on their faces relaxed, and then they felt joyful. Jing Jiao left the Buddha land, but he didn't go back to the ancestral planet. Instead, he went to that patch of empty space. He found a magic treasure from the Zhongzhou school among the meteorites on the outskirts of the empty space. He put it back after taking a look at it. Then, he thought of what the god had said and headed toward the empty space without hesitation. He had a better understanding of what the god had said when he entered the empty space. A gentle wind arrived in Chaotian. This gentle wind first appeared on the ocean between the continents. He saw many boats, but he didn't find any, so he went to chat with his giant friend for a while. Though the giant didn't quite understand his current state, he was still happy to see him come back. He invited dozens of female spirits to come over and dance to celebrate with him at the cost of half a piece of godly soulwood. Next, he went to Penglai Island and paid a formal visit to the king of the godly boats, scaring him badly. The next morning, a fairy woman in white clothing was practicing her sword work while standing on the surface of the ocean. A gentle wind suddenly tousled her dress. She reached out her hand to feel the gentle wind. She looked at the man in front of her and said softly, "Long time no see." After leaving the ocean and the girl, he went to the 1,000-mile wind corridor. The strong wind that had lasted for many years had stopped. The lotus flowers on the lake were swaying gently, unwilling to be tousled like the dress. The inn had disappeared, and Bu Qiuxiao was cultivating in the mountains, so he didn't see him. Then he went to Zhaoga City and visited the Jing House and the Royal Palace. Then he went to the Snowland and visited Zen Master and the Little Snow Girl. He went to the Guocheng Temple and visited the pagoda and the vegetable garden. He went to the seashore of the East Ocean and visited the Heavenly Well and Apyao. Shuiyu Nunnery was on his way there. He walked up the stairs and knocked on the door softly. The door of the nunnery was pushed open. A young girl lowered her head shyly when she saw the young man in white clothing, saying, "Our nunnery doesn't receive guests. Please forgive us, young master." All of a sudden, the young girl saw some flower petals scattered on the stone steps. She lifted her head in bewilderment and found that the withered peach tree in front of the nunnery had come back to life and bloomed countless flowers. She was pleasantly surprised, but she didn't notice that the young man in white clothing had already entered the nunnery. Chapter 1036. Jing Jiao could go anywhere he wanted to without knocking on the door. He did so to show the girls in the nunnery the peach blossoms, and he also wanted to ask the people in the nunnery about something. Unexpectedly, the people of Shuiyu Nunnery didn't know where that guy had gone either. He went to the meditation room with a round window. Lien Sanyue had slept here for many years, and a peach blossom had always been by her pillow. There is also a meditation room with a round window in the 3,000 nunnery outside the Yuan City. The meditation room in Shuiyu Nunnery was built under the order of Lien Sanyue. It was here that she had recuperated and rested in the beginning. It was for this reason that there was a grave here. The solitary grave of 1,000 years was not so desolate, as it was accompanied by the morning sunlight every day. Jing Jiao stood in front of the young master Li's grave for a while, and then he turned around and walked to the other side of the bridge. Many things had happened in the nunnery on the other side of the bridge. For example, Lien Sanue slept for a long time, Bai Zhao slept for a long time, and Jingjiu slept for a long time as well. Another thing was that the entire Aoyama sect had almost moved here when he was asleep. Zhu and Yuan Chu had arranged the hot pot. Tong Yin and Kang Yang had arranged a chess game. Lu Shui had made a bamboo chair, and Gu Qing had even knelt down by the bed and told him about it. Yet, there was only one significant event that had happened in this nunnery. Lien Sanue had become the morning sunlight that filled the sky. After staying in the 3000 nunnery for a few days, Jingjiu had finally returned to Aoyama. He landed on Shinma Peak after taking a look at the horse-drawn carriage of the Gu clan in Cloudy Town. Shinma Peak was even more deserted than before. The monkeys were chirping incessantly, welcoming his return with a bewildered expression. It suddenly rained down from the sky. It seemed that the reconstructed Great Formation of Aoyama didn't care much about this aspect. The sound of leaves hitting on the ground could be heard at the foot of the cliff. Jingjiu turned around and saw Gu Qing. Gu Qing couldn't speak for a while due to the complicated feelings he had. He knelt down on the ground with a thud and knocked his head on the ground. "Have you been here all this time?" Jingjiu asked. Gu Qing said, "Zhen Tao left 2 years ago, so I came back here." The whole of Chaotian had no idea that he had returned to Shinma Peak and lived in the small wooden hut he had built 1,000 years ago. Jingjiu didn't expect that he would ask the king of boats and Shui Yu nunnery. He looked at his favorite disciple and said after a moment of silence, "Have some tea." He didn't treat Gu Qing as a guest and invited him to drink tea, but he wanted him to make tea. Perhaps it was still the iron kettle and small stove from back then. The tea was bubbling and emitting an extremely faint fragrance. Jingjiu picked up the teacup and brought it to his nose. He sniffed it and revealed a satisfied expression. Looking at this scene, Gu Qing was very surprised. Could it be that his master could do it now? After taking a sip of tea, Jingjiu said, "It's good to reminisce for a while. Let's find a time to ascend." Gu Qing didn't dare object, replying, "Yes, master." Jingjiu uttered, and threw the teacup to the foot of the cliff. The sounds of quarreling and fighting broke out in the forest. It should be the monkeys fighting for the tea. Soon, a cheerful cry broke out. It seemed that one of the monkeys had snatched the tea. Gu Qing guessed what Jingjiu meant by throwing the teacup. "Are you going to?" he asked after some hesitation. "I'm going on a long journey," said Jingjiu. Gu Qing asked nervously, "Will you come back?" "I don't think so," said Jingjiu. As for whether this journey would lead to death or to an endless path ahead, Gu Qing didn't know and didn't dare ask. "What else do you want to do?" asked Jingjiu. After some thought, Jingjiu said, "Let's eat hot pot." Gu Qing had confirmed his earlier guess. His master was indeed different from before, and he could sense it now. Jingjiu felt sad despite the pleasant surprise, and asked the monkeys to inform Shuriwe Peak and other places. While waiting for the food ingredients and utensils, Jingjiu was worried that his master would feel bored, so he asked cautiously, "Would you like to play mahjong for a while?" "I'm short of people," said Jingjiu. No sooner had he said this than a dusty dragon came out from the distant Sword Peak, passing through the peaks and the Sword Washing Stream, and arrived in front of the Shinma Peak. Then it arrived at the top of the peak in an instant. As the dusty dragon dispersed, the figure of Ping Yongka appeared. Ping Yongka knelt down in front of Jingjiu with tears in his eyes, saying, "Master, you've finally come back." "I'm here to tell you that that guy is dead," said Jingjiu. Suddenly, a bridge formed by the strings of swords stretched from the top of Qingrong Peak to the top of Shinma Peak. Nan Wang walked over from the bridge. She looked calm and collected, but the silver bells on her bare ankles were ringing incessantly, looking very messy. "Can you drink wine? I can do everything." Jingjiu took the alcohol jar from her hands. After eating hot pot, drinking wine, and playing 2 games of mahjong, Jingjiu went to Tianguang Peak. The small hut had been repaired, and a chair had been set up, but the stone monument on the round turtle couldn't be restored. "I've always thought that the hermit peaks are not in the stone monument, but in your stomach." Jingjiu walked to the front of the round turtle and sat down, looking at the ocean of clouds that looked like a blanket outside the cliff, as if he were talking to himself. The round turtle remained motionless with his eyes closed, as if he were made of a real rock. Jingjiu continued, I had thought that you might want to conceal some of your magic, so I didn't pay much attention to it. But now I've learned some things in the outside world, and I've thought of you again. The round turtle opened his eyes slowly and glanced at Jingjiu with his murky eyes, saying in a hoarse voice, Ah, you're back. Jingjiu didn't pay any attention to the round turtle's pretense, as he said, Not every life has its own meaning, and not everything has its own explanation, but a being like you can't possibly exist just to accompany time. The round turtle was the most ancient divine animal in Chaotian. He had been guarding this place since the founding of the Aoyama sect. Nobody knew how long he had lived, and nobody knew what kind of remarkable magic he possessed. Immortal, what are you trying to say? The round turtle asked with a bewildered expression. Jingjiu pulled back his gaze and said while staring into the round turtle's eyes, that God found a way to control the snow girl and the all-in-one sword after he came to Chaotian. But why haven't we found the snow girl after so many years? The round turtle asked after some thought. Is it because she has snow blindness? Jingjiu said, It's because the black obelisk and the all-in-one sword have been guarded by someone the entire time. After a moment of silence, the round turtle said, You have to make it clear that I'm not a human being. It's indeed you, Jingjiu said. You guessed it right. The all-in-one sword and that thing were both kept in my stomach. The round turtle continued. After the god you mentioned came, I spat them out and gave them to him in secret. Why? Asked Jingjiu. The round turtle said angrily, I'm responsible for guarding the all-in-one sword and keeping an eye on the formidable snow girl. I'm under a lot of pressure. Besides, all the prisoners were dead at the time. Why couldn't I relax for a few days? Jingjiu asked after some thought. Are you a supervisor left by that civilization? The advanced civilization that set up this space prison couldn't leave the snow girl alone, so it was understandable that they had left some measures to restrain her in secret. What the hell are you? The round turtle retorted. Jingjiu pressed. What are you then? The round turtle looked at the distance, his eyes showing the vicissitudes of life. In fact, I'm a prisoner, he said slowly. Chapter 1037. The Master Round Turtle, who had the most mysterious origin and the longest lifespan in Chaotian, was a prisoner of the advanced civilization of the previous generation. What was more shocking was that he was the first and the last prisoner of this prison. His life form was truly unique, as if he could live as long as the universe. It was for this reason that the executors of the advanced civilization gave him the method to control the snow girl and the all-in-one sword for safekeeping. Who would have thought that even that advanced civilization had disappeared, but it was still alive? The round turtle knew what Jingjiu wanted to know the most. So he said, Don't ask me what that civilization looked like. It's because my awareness was wiped out when I was locked up here, and their wills were implanted in me to keep an eye on the snow girl. It turns out that you didn't give the black monument and the all-in-one sword to that god because of the pressure. Jingjiu went on. You couldn't deal with the snow girl because of the wills of those executors. You wanted that god to kill the snow girl so that you could get rid of your mission and gain true freedom. The round turtle grinned slightly, as if he were laughing. You're a smart person, so you don't have to say it out loud. Can you go out now? Asked Jingjiu. The round turtle said, I can go out the day the snow girl left. Why don't you go out then? Pressed Jingjiu. Why should I go out? Asked the round turtle. Freedom? Pressed Jingjiu. The round turtle said, Being alive is the greatest freedom. After some thought, Jingjiu said that's true. In order to figure out how to survive, Jingjiu returned to the Shinma Peak and entered the manor cave to stay behind closed doors. All the information he had seen in the green sky mirror, the sun, the grand nirvana, and the deep end of the black monument crossed each other in his awareness, and then gradually quieted down. A few years had passed. He pushed open the stone door of the manor cave and walked out. He took one last look at the peaks of Aoyama. As the gentle wind blew over, he had already disappeared by the cliff's edge. If this departure could be regarded as ascension, it would be the third time. After leaving Chaotian, Jingjiu sat on the bamboo chair in the space for a while, and then went to the Tianchi Galaxy. 2 years ago, Jingjiu and Shun Yunmai had passed by this place during their vacation trip. The purpose was to see the spectacular scene when this galaxy was flooded by the sea of dark matter. 2 years had passed. The heavenly ruler system had completely sunk into the ocean. Only the star was still struggling to emit its last, feeble light. Without hesitation, he flew into the sea of dark matter. In this incomparably dark world, it took a long time or a long distance to see a light source. However, his perception could be extended infinitely, and his speed was infinitely fast, so there was always light in front of him. Jingjiu didn't intend to go to the place where the sea of dark matter was born. Now that he was here, the two worlds must be connected. It didn't take long for him to find Nest. The dark tentacles slowly floated in space, looking like seaweed. This nest was in a dormant state and didn't emit any evil aura. It was extremely peaceful. He flew directly into the broodmother's body. After finding the organ for communicating information, Jingjiu sent out his perception, which crossed the entire sea of dark matter and entered the first crack in space, arriving in an unknown world. The range of his perception was limited to what he knew or what he guessed. As such, he didn't go too far into that world. That world had no color, no so-called spatial structure, and no fundamental particles. It was like a big pot of soup made of the dark matter, the dark energy, and the numbers. In other words, it was chaotic. Different from what the human experts had speculated, there were intelligent beings in the world of the dark matter. That being wasn't the objective will of the entire universe. It was because Jingjiu had sensed some specific existences. They were vague and fog-like existences, similar to the ghosts described in the stories. It didn't take long for those beings to discover Jingjiu's existence. They all swarmed over. Jingjiu came to the sea of dark matter because he intended to have a conversation with them before he left, but he didn't succeed. He couldn't get in touch with those beings, and those beings couldn't get in touch with him. They could only discover each other's existence. Existence was the most basic information and also the most important factor. After confirming that he couldn't communicate with them, Jingjiu returned to his own universe. The white cloth was fluttering in the space despite the absence of wind. The mother nest woke up, but she didn't see anything and didn't know what had happened. The blue seawater lapped against the seashore incessantly. The people on the small island stared at the lamp, remaining silent. They had been exposed to the ocean wind for 9 days. Jingjiu had said that he would solve the problem in 9 days, or he would die. It was the last day, but he hadn't woken up yet. The flame of the bronze lamp had become extremely weak, as if it would be extinguished at any moment. The atmosphere grew more and more tense. Sangju was aware of the state Zhao Liu and the others were in at the moment, so he signaled them with his eyes to be more quiet. A gentle wind suddenly ruffled the coconut trees. Jingjiu opened his eyes while sitting on the bamboo chair. Zhao Liu asked softly, "Where have you been?" "Many places," replied Jingjiu. After a moment of silence, Zhao Liu asked softly, "Do you have anything to tell us?" Jingjiu said without hesitation or any introduction, "In terms of a number of beings, the sea of dark matter is the main world. The entire universe is like a steamed cake." As he said this, he looked at the nearby Hua Shi, and then remembered that she was not the one who made the steamed cake. Hua Shi walked toward the bamboo chair by the seashore. "The permanent stars on our side are like the raisins on the steamed cake. The planets are like the sands, and the warp holes are the holes dug by the worms on the surface, but they are also filled with the crumbs of the steamed cake," Jingjiu went on. Tong Yin said, "This is not a good metaphor. We should use the riverbank, the sand, and the water." Jingjiu said, "That's the case. The current situation is that the water has rushed out from those holes." "So?" pressed Shun Yunmai earnestly. "This is the problem of the humans. So, It has nothing to do with the other side. Jingjio went on. Though this sword is broken, you people might be able to repair it. As for how to ignite those permanent stars, it's your business. The godly battering master remarked icily in the distance. Are you going to leave after telling us this? Jingjio didn't heed him. He looked at Tong Yin and said, I've gone to confirm something. If you really can't solve the problem here, go back to Chaotian and bring the round turtle out. Hearing this, Lu Shui, Zhuoruzhui, and the others were all startled, wondering what he meant. Let eat the darkness like the starlight. Jingjio said, Don't worry. It won't burst its stomach even if it eats the darkness for a few thousand years. It was then that Huashi arrived by the seashore and came before the bamboo chair. She blinked her eyes a few times, and the expression in her eyes suddenly turned from nonchalant to bewilderment. Big brother, what's wrong with you? She asked Jingjio. Jingjio understood what was going on. Thank you, he said to her earnestly. This gratitude was directed at the young priestess. Then he said to Huashi softly, It's nothing. I'm just a bit sleepy. I want to take a nap. Having said that, he looked at Shun Yunmai, and then at Zhuoruzhui, Tong Yin, Peng Lang, Yuan Chu, Yushan, and Cain Yang. His line of sight moved back and forth between the sky and the ocean, passing by the coconut groves, the cliff rocks, and the ferrymen of the previous generations. A huge wave rose on the surface of the ocean, and a black island appeared. Dead Dog came back to bid farewell to Jingjio. Standing on the head of Dead Dog, the snow girl looked at the seashore indifferently. Cold Cicada was waving its armored leg on her head reluctantly. Jingjio let out a smile and rubbed Ada's head. Be smart, he said to Lu Shui. Lu Shui felt exceedingly sad, but he didn't dare show it. He nodded forcefully. In the end, he turned to Zhao Liu. Zhao Liu stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Jingjio patted her back and whispered in her ear, Let's go. It seemed that nothing had happened. The incomplete moon was still visible intermittently in the sky. The ocean wind was still as gentle as ever. The monkeys were still as noisy as ever. After a long while, Zhao Liu straightened her body. The sharpest arm in the universe dropped down slowly. It was exceedingly gentle. It fell down like a leaf by the side of the bamboo chair. The perfect man had his eyes closed. He was no longer breathing, and no energy could be sensed. Seeing the scene, Cain Yang and Yushan's eyes turned red, but they tried their best not to cry out loud. Song Ju sighed. I'm sorry for your loss. No, said Zhao Liu. He's gone to another place. This was not an artistic statement to ease the sadness, but a true description. The ferrymen of the previous generations understood after a moment of bewilderment. Was it possible that Jingjio's soul hadn't dissipated and died, but had ascended again? Yet, the ascension from the underworld was to the ground, and the ascension from Chaotian was to this universe. Where'd he go if he ascended from here? I've read an ancient book, and I like it very much. The last few paragraphs in the book are as follows. Shin Yunmai went on softly, but the sun is always the setting sun and the rising sun. When he walked down the mountain and put away the desolate afterglow, he would climb to the top of the mountain burning on the other side to spread the bright sunlight of the morning sun. On that day, I will also walk down the mountain quietly, holding my walking stick. Zhuoruzhui had read the article as well, so he read it aloud. One day, a joyful child would run up from a valley, holding his toy. Shun Yunmai continued after shooting him a glance. Of course, it's not me. But isn't it me? Zhuoruzhui asked. The two of them looked up at the sky where the gentle wind had disappeared at the same time, and read the last paragraph at the same time. The universe tempts a song and dance into eternity with its endless desire. This desire has no name in the human world, and it can be ignored. The last paragraph of this chapter comes from Shi Tieshing's The Earth Temple and I. I have recommended it to you before, and I recommend it again. The last paragraph is my favorite one, and it is one of the main themes of this book. The second main theme is explained at the end of tomorrow's chapter. The last chapter of The Path Toward Heaven will be published on the 21st of tomorrow, and there will be a serious epilogue to talk about the last 20 years. Chapter 1038. This chapter will be published half an hour later. The universe tempered a song and dance into eternity by its endless desire. This desire had no name in the human world, and it could be ignored. It didn't matter if he was called Jingyong, Jingjiu, or Ryan. It didn't matter if he had ascended to an unknown place or if he was dead. All in all, he hadn't appeared in this world for many years. Having dealt with the rebellions of the believers on those planets with the female priest of the Stargate, Zhong Lizi declined a request to stay on the main planet as a priest. She returned to the Stargate base and started her long vacation. She didn't stay in the praying hall, nor did she stay in Shoer City. Instead, she returned to the apartment in the underground. According to her request, the black market wasn't shut down and the gaming parlors weren't attacked. Everything was as usual in the Mingshan neighborhood, save for the presence of many plain-clothed policemen and surveillance cameras. After eating the grilled eggplant from the takeaway and carefully drinking half a bottle of ale, she became happy. She took out a rag and began to clean up. She wiped the holographic frame of Goldie on the cabinet clean and then started to clean the painting. In the painting was a cluster of golden sunflowers bound by a white cloth stained with blood. It was the famous oil painting of the distant ancient civilization. More importantly, it was not a replica of the painting in the art gallery of Shoer City, but an authentic one. She was aware that Jing Jiu cared a great deal about this painting, so she asked for it. This was the general meaning of seeing the object and thinking of the person. Nobody could see the thoughts of Zhao Liu and Lu Shui. It was not because they were expressionless. It was because they went to the 857 base to cultivate. On the one hand, they wanted to find a way to deal with the monsters of the sea of dark matter, and on the other hand, they wanted to cultivate in that desolate city. It was evident that they wanted to find a way to follow Jingjiu. Unexpectedly, Zhuoruzhui became the first governor in the history of the Federation of the Milky Way. With the cooperation of the Rand family and the Twirling Rain Company and the support of the military, he had a stable position. But it was meaningless because it was Qing who was in charge of all the government affairs and management. It seemed that he was no different from when he was the sect master of Aoyama. Since the young priest had left Huaxi's body, she wasn't allowed to take over the control of the central computer. She had to go back and forth among the specially manufactured cyborgs, and she would go to the Green Sky Mirror and the Grand Nirvana once in a while. There was a special team responsible for monitoring and managing her. The person in charge of the team was Peng Lang, so one could imagine how much importance he placed on her. After the real Hua, she woke up. She was sad for a while because of Jing Jiu's departure, so she returned to planet Full Moon. With the resources of the Hua family and the support of the authorities of the Federation of the Milky Way, the mining planet that had been closed and underdeveloped suddenly had an unprecedented capability. The mayor of Foggy Mountain was promoted to the chief administrative officer of the planet, and his position was taken over by Ms. Eve. On the other hand, the other occupant of apartment 720, Unit 1, had gone to a faraway place. The Snow Girl left the local galaxy and headed toward the cold and desolate deep part of the universe. She chose a different path from Jingjiu. It was because she didn't need to replenish her energy, and she could survive longer than a civilization. She didn't inform anybody of her departure, including Peng Lang. All she did was leave a line of words on the highest cliff on Mars. The universe is very vast. I want to go there and have a look. Shen Yunmai didn't believe this reason, thinking that the Shui Jie must have gone to the universe to search for the traces of the vanished high-level civilization. However, he didn't think much of it. After changing his body, he returned to his old house and locked himself up in that underground cave. It was said that he was studying some philosophical issues. Chao Yuan was also doing his research, but the objects he was studying were a bit terrifying. It was because they were essentially two corpses, General Li's and Jing Jiu's, regardless of whether they were the fairy metamorphosis or the remains. In General Li's coffin was a broken thread of Jing Jiu in the galaxy beyond the fog. In Jingjiu's body was some natural worm silk that he sewed for himself by the West Ocean. Though most of the natural worm silk had been used to replenish the sea qi, some strands of the natural worm silk were still left in his body, which were exposed when he self-destructed. Chao Yuan had indeed found a way to repair the all-in-one sword with the help of these research subjects. He was working with Tong Yin to plan and see if they could repair the all-in-one sword within 200 years. Tong Yin and Cain Yang were pondering the sequence of lighting up the permanent stars while facing the go pieces in the sky, assisted by the saint Sungju. Tong Yin often disturbed Shun Yunmai despite his anger and pondered the possibility of opening up Chaotian with him. These people formed a perfect closed loop and an outstanding research group. There was another peculiar combination on the ancestral planet: Ada, the dead dog, and the immortal Tan. They had been excavating the ruins of the early human civilization on the ancestral planet, including the tombs. It was because they were all good at this kind of work. Yuan Chu and Yushan were still sightseeing. They had visited many vacation planets and had a good time there. And they had gotten involved in some illegal businesses because of Shun Yunmai's suggestion. Of course, neither Qing nor Zhuruzhui were in the mood to deal with these matters. It was those fairy men of the previous generations who were in trouble. The god-slaying grandmaster and the pair of devil men in black insisted that Jingjiu's soul had dispersed and died, and that he hadn't ascended at all. They had never heard of a world above the world. Where could he ascend to? No matter whether these fairy men of the previous generations intended to avenge the grandmasters of Aoyama or to fight for power, they were indeed troublesome. It was because the Snow Girl and Jingjiu were not here. No matter how formidable Peng Lang and Zhao Lu were, they couldn't suppress all of them. The door of the apartment was suddenly knocked on. Zhong Lizi pushed open the door and saw two young girls and a chubby youth. She was taken aback for a moment and guessed that they should be the new ascendants from Chaotian. "Do you really think my house is the inn?" she asked helplessly. A young girl with a cute but unruly expression said sharply, "Mortals, how dare you be so rude?" "You must be Nan Wang," said Zhong Lizi after leading the three of them into the apartment. "Sit wherever you like." Nan Wang wondered what was going on. Zhong Lizi took out 3 bottles of wheat wine and handed them over, asking, "Why did you come out?" Nan Wang said, "Do we need your permission to come out and have a look?" Zhong Lizi suddenly thought of something. She intended to take back the bottles of wheat wine in her hand, but she didn't dare do so. Looking at the delicate and feeble young girl, she asked curiously, "May I ask, are you Miss Bai Zhao?" Bai Zhao was taken aback a bit, asking, "Has he mentioned me to you?" Zhong Lizi thought that that shameless guy had mentioned me to all the people in the Federation of the Milky Way, and she hoped that Zhong Lizi wouldn't be angry when she learned about it. Nan Wang said, "We'll talk about other things later. What's the situation now?" "He has left," said Zhong Lizi. Nan Wang didn't react much when Jingjiu returned to Chaotian and bid farewell to him. Bai Zhao got up and walked to the front of the cupboard, looking at the 3-dimensional photo frame. Zhong Lizi shot her a glance and told her about this world and the current situation. Nan Wang picked up the wine bottle and emptied it in one gulp, saying, "I'll deal with those guys." Zhong Lizi thought that he was not strong enough. Even Peng Lang, Zhao Liu, and Lu Shisui couldn't suppress the immortals of the previous generations, unless Jingjiu and the Snow Girl suddenly came back. "Senior Master Zhao, let this disciple do it. Don't tire yourself out." The youth hadn't spoken a word until now. Looking at him, Zhong Lizi suddenly thought of a possibility. "Ping Yongka," she exclaimed with a slightly changed expression. The youth got up and bowed to her, saying, "I'm the sect master of Aoyama, Ping Yongka. Greetings, fellow cultivator." It was then that Bai Zhao asked, while pointing to the painting of sunflowers on the wall, "Why is this white cloth stained with blood? What is it?" She didn't know that Jingjiu had asked her the same question. Zhong Lizi had asked the young priest the same question when she received the painting. She didn't have an answer. On the 3rd day, Jingjiu knew how to determine his position in the universe. However, he did not know where he was at this moment, because he had already left this universe. The way to leave was actually very simple. If he wanted to travel through space, he would have to magnify the perception of his soul infinitely. But if he wanted to leave, he would have to shrink it infinitely. It was smaller than the most basic particle, smaller than the limit of imagination. He couldn't feel any force here, and probability didn't exist either. There was only himself. His perception continued to stretch forward, as if it had turned into a dancing ribbon. The reason why this ribbon was colored was because of his current thoughts. The ribbon was like a buoyant force, bringing him above the front. This feeling was a little strange, and he didn't really understand why there was a direction. In order to find out the reason, he let go of his senses and let the ribbons wander as they pleased. Soon, he arrived at an unfamiliar world. As he continued flying, he saw something that seemed to be the sky. There was a particularly large figure in the sky. He was getting closer and closer to the figure. In the end, he broke through the sky and poked his head out from the surface of the lake. That figure was himself. There were many lotus leaves on the surface of the lake, surrounded by a valley. It was the lake he had to pass on his way to the 3,000 nunnery. It was the place where the young master Li had fallen into the lake. The temporary palace built by the Aoyama sect here was still there. It was early in the morning. A drizzle suddenly fell down. Lu Ci left the palace and headed toward the south on a cloud. The heavy snowfall blocked his way. Yuan Shijing was talking to his disciples with a solemn expression. Lu Ci and Yuan Shijing had died a long time ago when these palaces were built. But why were they here? The morning sun suddenly rose, emitting a great deal of heat and light, melting the ice and snow on the road instantly. Even the water was turned into wisps of smoke by the scorching sun. Leaning against the cliff's edge, Taiping Jinren held a bone flute in his hand, looking at Jing Jiao with a smile on his face. As Jing Jiao arrived at the nunnery, Lien Sanyue said to him while standing under the corridor, "You've come." Jing Jiao uttered, and walked across the small bridge, standing shoulder to shoulder with her, looking at the morning sun. Here, he didn't have to worry that she would turn into 10,000 rays of morning sunlight in the next moment. It was good. You've cultivated hard and ascended, but in the end, you've returned to the old world. Don't you feel tired of this boring repetition? Someone asked suddenly. No one was around the small bridge and the flowing water. I'll come back to see you in a few days, Jing Jiao said to Lien Sanyue. Lien Sanyue agreed and walked to the bridge. She kept looking at the sun in the sky with her hands folded behind her back. Jing Jiao passed through the meditation room and the round window, arriving by the lake. The slanting branch was reflected on the surface of the lake. Sitting on a stone bench by the lake, Jian Shilai was comprehending the sword work while looking at the slanting branch. He didn't heed Jing Jiao. Jing Jiao didn't heed him either. He walked to the other side of the lake and looked at the person reflected on the surface of the water. This is not a repetition. Why? It's because this is not the real Chaotian. It's a figment of my imagination. And it's not real. It's also real. This world and the old friends living in it were all the remnants of his awareness. Now that he lived in his own awareness, heaven and earth and the people were also real. They're all dead. As long as I'm alive, they're alive. At least they are here, on the ancestral planet. Shinoyama had told him about the imaginations of the early humans. The ancient humans thought that this world might be a dream of the gods. Now that he was the god, his will could become the real world. Don't you want to talk to Lien Sanyue? No, you're really heartless. Who are you? I don't know who I am, and I don't even know what I mean. If so, why do you care about love? What on earth is love? All the emotions originate from death, like fear. To live, one has to have connections, and the connections are the emotions. To reproduce, there's love and jealousy. Another example is human nature and animal nature. Have you experienced it? I had a mortal friend when I was little. I felt sad for a long time before his grave, after his death. From then on, I didn't want to experience it again. As a result, I started to experience many kinds of lives in my belief, including peaceful and joyful ones, exciting ones, tragic ones, comedic ones, bizarre ones, and ordinary ones. But in the end, death is the only outcome. Do you think this can help you see the truth of life clearly? You only have one life. You should try your best to live as long as possible. But what's the point of living like you? This was the question many people had about Jingjiu. Life will come to an end, so it's meaningless. Shen Yunmai would cry bitterly, so we should find some meaning at the moment. He went on, but if life doesn't come to an end, we should find some meaning first. Eternal life is an unproven proposition. All the universes will come to an end, and you are no exception. That person went on, so you have to learn how to come to an end instead of being devoured by time. This is the real purpose of existence. If this is the purpose of existence, why do we need to exist? Eternal life is a cruel thing. That's why those gods who have lived for a long time want to commit suicide. The word cruel is coined by the intelligent beings because they are afraid of coming to an end. So your statement is illogical. You said to find meaning, but what's the meaning of all this? I want to know the origin of existence, the principles of the universe, and the direction of the world. There are infinite universes and infinite principles. How can I understand them all? Someone in your universe once said, "My life has a limit, and my knowledge has no limit." Since there is a limit, there will always be a limit. Don't you understand? Jing Jiu said, "That's why I have to keep on living." That person said after a moment of silence, "That sounds reasonable. I need to think about it. I won't see you off." "No need." Jing Jiu turned around and walked forward. There was a mass of white light ahead. It was extremely pure, devoid of any impurities or information. In the next moment, his figure disappeared in the white light. The great path was walking alone. There was no need to see him off. The great path toward heaven. Chapter 1039. What did Jing Jiu and Su Lu say when they met for the first time? It was a self-introduction. I had prepared some words like Su Lu, such as Xiaofeng, Hubei, Yichang, previous names, resumes, and my family's names. That would be too awkward, so I decided to keep it simple. I lived in a very happy family. Many years ago, my best friend from university, Zhuo Siming, came to Yichang and stayed for 2 days. He often recalled waking up to see the sun shining brightly. My parents were playing Fight the Landlord on the computer, laughing and chatting. The whole house was full of happiness. Her leader said many times that the first time she went to Yichang, she felt the atmosphere was very good. Her niece Wanzi was very cute and made people feel very comfortable. I grew up in such a family, free to do as I pleased. I could change my name if I wanted to, and I didn't have to go to work if I wanted to. Later, I started writing books out of interest, and I even earned some money. It was a beautiful and smooth few decades. Even when I was young, I didn't have much money. Every day, I would wake up and eat a bowl of noodles. Then, I would go to the children's park with Titan Sports and sit on the grass, staring at the lake. I didn't have the feeling of pretending to be lonely or desperate. It was a kind of happiness with nothing to do. So if I could live my life again, I would definitely do the same. There was also a big lake outside the window of the Qin Kingdom. The scenery changed according to the weather. I was also very happy now, but I rarely stared at the lake. Most of the time, I would just praise it out of habit. Sometimes, I would diligently take pictures and send them to my friends in the 2 groups. When the sky was overcast, the wind was howling, and the rain was falling, the lake was very beautiful. The most beautiful thing was one day at 4 o'clock in the morning, when I was about to sleep, I suddenly saw the world outside the window stop. There was a faint fog on the other side of the lake. There was no wind on the lake, and it was as flat as a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and white clouds. It was so beautiful that it made my heart palpitate. With such a beautiful scene, I slept comfortably. When I woke up, I threw the picture in a group. Third Master and Sandbag jumped out at the same time and said, "Mirror of the sky." It did feel like that, but it was too rare. I have been in the Qin Kingdom for 10 years, and the only time when there was no wind was there was a picturesque scene. Life was like the lake outside the Qin Kingdom window. There were very few times when there was no wind. My mother didn't have any clear consciousness before she died. We stayed by her bedside and heard her say something very clearly with her eyes closed. "When the wind is calm, go." Those were my mother's last words. Now, the words on her tombstone were, "The wind is calm for a lifetime. The waves are calm for 1,000 years." I wrote this sentence on the glass wall of the study room and used it in the story. When the wind wasn't blowing, you had to pay attention to the scenery outside the window. When the wind was blowing, you had to strive to see something beautiful. Happiness needed to be found. You had to look for entertainment, variety shows, TV shows, movies, sports, eating, playing, or beautiful scenery and people. If you really wanted to take things too hard and peek into the deepest part of life, you would find the popular word funeral, although most people might not understand what it meant. Here, Romain Rolland's words once again came up. There's only one kind of true heroism in the world, and that is to recognize the truth of life and continue to love it. In the past, he had said that this sentence was a compromise to his fate, a helpless self-consolation. But now, it seemed that it was actually a good thing, because everyone needed consolation. What is the meaning of living? He wanted to look at the other side of the mountain. He wanted to think about why the water flowed downwards. He wanted to find the origin of everything and the reason for its existence. What if I can't find it? Then keep looking. But what if everything, including existence itself, was meaningless? What happened then? This is a false proposition. As the book said, immortality can't be proven, and nothing meaningless can be proven either. That's why Jing Jiao kept moving forward. He wanted to prove his existence by living, and he wanted to prove the existence of the meaning by pursuing the meaning. We are not him. We only need to think about it. I've been afraid of death since I was a child, and I've often thought about this issue. After I turned 40, I believe that the purpose of living is to explain the meaning of living. Of course, I can't explain it clearly. The story of the path toward heaven isn't used to explain it, but to describe the process. It's different from the book of Choosing Heaven. The book of Choosing Heaven says that there is no destiny, only choices. The point is that every choice we make will change our fate. The path toward heaven has many forks in the road, and the choices made by Jing Jiao were different from those made by Tai Pingzhenren, Lin Sanyue, the Great Grandmaster, General Li, and Zhao Liu, but it's not important. It's because all the paths lead to the same destination, the path toward heaven, and they all walk on different paths. No matter which path you choose, you just have to stick to it. The story of the path toward heaven doesn't make much sense. It's just about the cultivation, in my opinion. In the introduction of the Toad book, there is a sentence. There are thousands of magic spells and endless paths. I only have one question. Can one achieve immortality? This is the principle of the cultivation that I've been taught since I was a child. Why do humans cultivate? To be higher, faster, and stronger? Even if you want to improve your strength, it's for self-protection, not for glory. It's hard for me to accept a cultivation practitioner who fights, plots, and plays tricks every day. Cultivation is the right thing to do. If possible, Jing Jiao should hide in his manor cave like he did in his previous life. However, it's not a good thing if he does that. In fact, I failed to do so in the end. I often resort to plots and plot some exciting plots, but I don't forget to act pretentious all the time. It can't be helped. My professional ethics are too strong, and it has become a habit for me to prioritize the reader's interest in reading. Fortunately, I liked most of the plots, such as eating hot pot at Shima Peak, eating hot pot in Cloudy Town, eating hot pot in Scenery Garden, stepping on the ocean of clouds at Tianguang Peak, Lu Ci turning into a sword, and Jing Jiao looking for something to sharpen his sword. My favorite plot was the Dao competition at Zhongzhou School, winning the tripod and the green sky mirror, and the ascension. I enjoyed writing all the plots, especially the life in the 720 building on the full moon planet. It was because that building, the snow, the cats, and the birds were all part of my life, and I had fed many cats there. If one pursued a plain life, the plot and characters would not be intense. The long life of a cultivator would also give them another layer of feeling about life and death. I have told everyone before that the plot would fade with time. This was something that I had foreseen and looked forward to when I started writing about the Great Path. Throughout the entire book, I did not expect many people to remember it in the future. It was like a modern poem. You would have a feeling when you read it, but few people could remember what the poem said. The preface of the books in Chao used the ancient poems, and the preface of the books was the modern poems after ascending to the Federation of the Milky Way. Of course, I did it on purpose. I liked the preface of the books very much, and Haidang had spent a great deal of time and energy on it. Combined with what I had said in the previous paragraph, my real intention was to write The Path Toward Heaven as a poem. Which poem should I write? It was the one used in the book. The last sentence of Shi Tiesheng's The Temple of Earth and I had been comforting me over the years. I thought it was the best poem I could think of. Please allow me to copy it here. But the sun, he is always the setting sun, and also the rising sun. When he walks down the mountain after extinguishing the flame and withdrawing the desolate sunlight, he climbs up the mountain top on the other side, spreading the bright sunlight of the morning sun. On that day, I will also walk down the mountain quietly, holding onto my walking stick. One day, in a certain valley, a happy child will run out, hugging his toy. Of course, it's not me. But isn't it me? The universe tempered a song and dance into eternity with its endless desire. This desire has a name in the human world. It's not worth considering. This desire has a name in the human world. It's not worth considering. His name might be Gu Qing, or Nan Shu, or Aoyama, or Xinyun Mai, or the Snow Girl, or Su Lu, or Jingjiu. In the beginning, I had considered whether I should write The Path Toward Heaven as a group portrait because of this consideration. The main reason was that I was worried that Jingjiu would be too boring. His body was special, and so was his mental state, and he was invincible. Such a life would be boring. Many readers said that Jingjiu was tasteless. I once saw a title on the internet called Tasteless Man, and I almost used it on him. It was because he had no taste to begin with, and he couldn't experience many tastes in life. Of course, it was risky to use him as the male protagonist, but I decided to do so when I started the book. It was because I was certain that he had the greatest passion and the deepest persistence in life under his tastelessness. Those are the common parts in every human being, and they're the most necessary parts of life, the origin of life. Such a person is qualified to be the embodiment of the endless desire of the universe, and he is qualified to be the main character of our story. Among the main characters I have written, there is another one who is qualified to be the main character, Su Lu. It's because he has become a god, but he chose to leave life. Many years ago, when I wrote the epilogue of The Vermilion Bird, I had said that I wanted to write a trilogy of the mind trance, consisting of the mind trance, the mind trance, and the mind trance. Many readers might not have noticed that the last volume of The Path Toward Heaven is called Godly Records. Yes, it's the last volume of the trilogy. In fact, after I ascended to the Federation of the Milky Way, most of my friends who had read the story of the spy had guessed what was going on. Yes, from a year of Qing Yu to the spy, and then to The Path Toward Heaven, it was a world I had always wanted to complete, and everybody knew about it. When The Path to Heaven opened, I had already confirmed that this would be the last full-length novel. The reason why I said that it would be the last 2 or 1 full-length novel in my book introduction was because I didn't want the readers to think that this story was the last part of the trilogy. If it was confirmed to be the last full-length novel, then I would definitely finish the trilogy. Since it was the last long novel, I wrote it more carefully and unrestrainedly than before. As I mentioned in my acceptance speech and the 2 million word acceptance speech, the preparation for The Path Toward Heaven was very meticulous, and the writing style was very deliberate. I would stick to it, even though it might seem like I was a little too crafty. When I started the book, I asked in my acceptance speech if I was worried that the story would be too dry. The hero in the book would say later, "I have never thought about this. I was very careful and conscientious in the technical details, but I was unrestrained in the interest and the core. I didn't make any adjustments or self-restraint, but I hesitated on one thing. In the beginning, I intended to write Su Lu as a villain. Gods were used to standing on the opposite side of mankind, and I became the kind of person I hated the most in the past. This kind of literary chant and subversion of the past were too deliberate. I didn't care about deliberate, but I liked Sulu. Why should I write him as someone I didn't like? More importantly, I didn't think the past needed to be subverted. The stories I wrote and the people in the stories, no matter good or bad, brave or cowardly, were what I wanted to write. Jiang Yitsao and Ah Cho left Gaoyang with blood all over their bodies. Where was the spring breeze? The old dog was teaching in Zhejiang. The white elephant was walking in the distance. Methria was about to explode. Zolele was still sleeping peacefully. In the end, Fan Xian stood up in the grass. Chen Pingping waited until he came back. The arms of second brother, Wang Pe, and Jian Shilai were all broken. Chun Changsheng and Tang 36 watched the fat carp sink into the mud at the bottom of the pond for many times from the tree in the Tradition Academy. If the heaven didn't give birth to the headmaster, the world would be as dark as night. Sang Sang had been cultivated into a Buddha by Ning Ke, so she naturally forgot how to cook noodles with fried eggs. Lu Xi came and left lightly like the spring breeze. The morning light was like yesterday, and the wind and snow were like before. There were only two colors of black and white in front of the 720 building. A cat crouched on the wall of the old brush pen shop and the cliff of Shinma Peak, watching all this. He was still a lab rat when he was in the small bookstore. This was my past. It was very simple. It was to write stories and write about those people. This kind of life began when I was bored. In 2001, I tricked my family into pooling money to buy a computer to listen to music. When I had nothing to do, I wrote a wuxia novel set in the Northern Song Dynasty. To this day, no one has seen it except for my family. Then in 2003, I was bored on the web crawler forum and wanted to talk to the moderator of the information section, Ah Cho. So I wrote the story of Ingxiu in the 10 years and put her in the book. Some of the poems in the 10 years of Qing Dynasty were written by her. I mentioned it to her last year, but she forgot about it. I checked it for a long time and found it was really written by her. Tom is really scary. The leader was the moderator of the comment section at the time, so he knew her and started to think about making money. That's how the Vermilion Bird story came into being. I've admitted many times that the Vermilion Bird story didn't have a good attitude when it first started. I thought it was just making money, and there was no need to be too serious. It wasn't until the Taiwanese publishing house went bankrupt and ASXS started to be published that my attitude changed completely. I started to write about gods and Buddhas. I wrote to my heart's content, and even taking a day off every week was the best. The Vermilion Bird magazine didn't earn much money, but it could be considered as an official entry into the industry. This was also the first time the name Dirty Hands appeared in front of you. Following that, you had to discuss marriage, which involved the issue of earning more money. Therefore, with a very proper attitude, you wanted to write a big red book, and thus the birth of the Qing Year. After writing the 10 years of Qing Dynasty in 2009, I had some savings. I did some calculations and found that it was enough for a down payment and a wedding ceremony. The housing prices in Qing Dynasty were cheap. When I bought it, it was more than 4,000 yuan per square meter. I paid off a loan of more than 300,000 yuan. I felt that it was safe and decided to write the book I wanted to write the most, which was The Spy. The Spy's theme and method of writing, no matter how you looked at it, there was a limited audience. So I took the initiative to tell Bao Jian to lower the price. See, my judgment of the market was accurate, and it was cute. The Spy finished writing happily and felt that life was awesome. Then I fell into a state of intense anxiety, thinking about what to do with the next book. So I used my most serious attitude to write a book that I felt should be the best, which was Coming Night. In fact, I always thought that from the level of vitality to the degree of realization to the results and all other aspects, Coming Night was the best because I was still young. It was just that 1 or 2 years of rapid progress was too fast. My body couldn't take it after 1 or 3 years. After my father's heart bypass surgery, I couldn't take it anymore after sending the leader home from the airport. I went to the community hospital and was told to go directly to the big hospital. Then, the doctor in the big hospital took a look at my blood pressure and ignored me. He picked up the phone and asked if there were any beds available. No, there must be beds. High Pressure 220 was also a very impressive experience. Like my grandfather, I rested for a period of time. I overcame a lot of minor problems, such as tinnitus, bleeding in the fundus of my eyes, and other minor but extremely worrying problems. After I finished Coming Night, I went to 10-cent literature. Although both sides are now a family at that time, I still felt a little pressure. The pressure was that my results had to be good. Fortunately, the results of Choosing Heaven were really good. Then, in 2015, my mother got sick. My mood, energy, and time were torn apart indescribably. At that time, only the words "no updates today" could be seen on my WeChat account. I didn't explain the reason even once because I was still writing seriously. Looking back, from Vermilion Bird to The Path Toward Heaven, every book had something that I was extremely proud of. Every book was my proud work. I used all my strength in every book from the bottom of my heart, as if I was facing an abyss. I wouldn't stop until I was shaking my head. Again, if I could start over, I would probably still be like this. Why? Because we can only live once, my friends. Since that was the case, of course, I had to try my best to live without regrets. This was my pursuit, and I have been doing so all these years. As I said many times, my literary talent and technical ability might not be too strong, but my professional ethics were really good. Of course, I wasn't talking about writing tens of thousands of words a day and never stopping. There would always be things to do in life, and I didn't have the time or energy to write, but that every story I wrote was very serious, and my attitude was very correct. I had reached the limit of my ability. Not liking my writing was very normal, but it didn't mean that I wasn't serious. Writing was ultimately self-proof. If the author put enough effort into it, then it would be perfect. I had done this. Hard work would always be rewarded. Starting from 2003, when I started writing about Inxio's 10-year history, I wrote seriously for 17 years. The results were really good. My subscriptions were really strong, and I had won the monthly and annual votes. My film and television adaptations were very good, and no matter how you looked at it, I should be one of the best in the industry. I had also won many awards, and I should have won all the awards related to online literature. To put it bluntly, no matter who wrote the history of online literature in the future, they would definitely mention me and the stories I had written. Otherwise, they would just be writing nonsense. This was glory. I didn't say in the past, but now I had to flaunt it. Why? Because I wanted to make those who liked me or those who liked these stories feel more proud and have more confidence to brag. Although my point of view hadn't changed for more than 10 years, that it was fine as long as people liked the books and didn't have to like the author. Similarly, it didn't matter if people hated me as an author, as long as it didn't escalate to the books. But what if I also had some fans? Our readers were called Group 7. Xiong Lin Quan, Lao Bai, and Da Vinci had a strong friendship because they had gone through life and death with Su Lu, but it was probably because Su Lu was awesome to some extent. I haven't finished writing the epilogue yet, so I have to publish a list of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank the readers who have subscribed, not including those who scolded me after reading it. Then I would like to thank the previous moderators and the readers who I can remember at this time. Pan Shun, 8 Trigrams Fish, Cloud, Lazy, Chasing Dreams, Bobo, Snow is Still Burning, Lord Kai Kai, Little Treasure, Bamboo of Morning and Evening, Guanshanamo, Jean Wutsai, Color the Wind, Begonia, Snow is Burning, Tears Brewing Coffee, Off Faint, Hi Yongguithro 01, Baptism of Blood and Snow, White Horse Howling in the Cold, Crazy, Pig Cat F, Haidang is Still Here, Purple-Eyed Distant, like Jiao and Juan, Fong Hailing, Little Secret Agent, Mo Emur, Fong Lianhai, Wang Jin Liu, Hua Xiaoduo, Hank Mudfield, Ilan Shanshan, and Dun Huai, Murakami Natsuki, Zhong Lin, Morning Snow, Morning Clear. All right, there are definitely a lot of names that I should remember, but I'm already a bit confused at this time. They are all in the wine. As for my great editors and the important people in my writing career, let's not talk about them. I love you guys too. A few months ago, I started announcing that The Path to Heaven would end on August 21st. I was so confident because I worked very hard to ensure that I had an endless supply of manuscripts. Many of my friends didn't understand why I chose that day, but the reason was very simple. That day was my 10th wedding anniversary with the leader. Some of my readers should have already remembered, because you guys sent me wedding gifts, books, and all kinds of fun things. You guys even forced me to sing in YY. For more than 10 years, I received a lot of love and money on the internet. This sentence is very mushy, but I don't dislike it because it's true, and the more the better. This kind of life is really very proud. There are too many things that I'm proud of, so I won't mention them here. However, there are a few things that I really want to share with you guys, even though I've shown them off to my friends countless times at the dinner table. If I've talked to you guys in the end of the chapter before, then I'll treat today as the first time. The first thing that I'm most proud of is reading the cigarette man's profanity. I guess the ending halfway through, and specifically that sentence. The second thing that I'm most proud of is watching Butterfly Blue become a full-time expert at the end and contributing a little bit of my wisdom. The third thing that I'm most proud of is that the author, Angel of the Underworld, recommended Jiangnan Style to me one year. After I read it, I determined that it would be an unprecedented hit. After I arrived in Beijing, I drank with Brother Bao, Xiaohua, and Lu Yi. They were puzzled, and I told them to wait. It would exceed their expectations. In the end, I was right. The third thing has nothing to do with aesthetics. I just wanted to prove my judgment. I know what people like, and if I wanna, I can always do it. So why did you decide not to write a long web novel? Of course, it's not because I'm worried that I can't keep up with the times, nor is it because of money. It's not difficult to write another long novel and earn a small goal. Let's go back to the trilogy that I mentioned earlier. When I was chatting with teacher Xiao Yanjun and the reporters, I mentioned why web novels are all super long. In addition to the commercial needs of leveling up, updating every day, and the long tail effect. Another reason is that we authors are not writing a single story, but a description of a world and the people in that world. I'm not good at constructing the world, and I'm always a boring materialist. The trilogy and The Legend of the Rosefinch are actually different time periods in the real world. The Falling Night is the Genesis that I like, and The Legend of the Chosen Sky is the lost continent that I want to create. After the completion of Chaotian, the world that I want to write about, and the world that I'm capable of writing about, have already been written. If I could think of a special world, I would have written about science fiction a long time ago. I've finished my view of the world, but I'm still interested in the relationships between people and certain stories, but they don't need to be written in such a long time. Well, I have to admit that I'm getting old. Though I rarely feel this way, and my mentality has always been that of a 20-something-year-old, it's indeed a bit tiring. The most important reason is that I want to change. I've been involved in the history of web novels for 17 years, and I'm a part of this history. Like I said earlier, this is enough. What else can I pursue? I don't want a life that's going to be the same. Back when I dropped out of Sichuan University and quit working in the Department of Motor Vehicles, it was because I didn't want to live a life where I could see myself more than 10 years later. My life in the last 10 years has been very interesting and happy. It's because I've turned my hobby into a profession, and I'm not bound by anything and don't have to deal with anybody. I've been playing by myself for so many years, and it's really cool. There's a saying that once one's hobby becomes a profession, one will lose all its charm, but I don't think so. Writing is still my hobby up until the moment I write the epilogue. I don't feel conflicted about turning my hobby into a profession, and I don't write any stories that I don't want to because of money. I'm quite satisfied with myself. I like writing stories, so I'll keep writing them, but I want to change the specific method. Well, I do in the following days. First of all, I'll have to build a strong body and a civilized spirit. I'll try my best to read more books and movies and exercise my body. Since I said I'll keep writing until I die, I'll try my best to die a little later and write for a few more years. Second, I'll make The Spy a movie. There are other projects, but The Spy is my priority. I'll participate in the whole process and work hard. I'll report to everyone if there's any news. I've mentioned in my book more than 10 years ago that I have two goals in life. One is to write a book, which I finished when I published Suzaka Chronicles. The other is to make a movie. Although I've already made the movie, I said I want to make a movie. I don't know how to do it, but I'll learn it slowly. The following work is more important. I want to write some stories that are more ruthless. The ruthless I'm talking about here isn't bloody or violent, but it's more exciting. It's something that shouldn't be written purely for business. It won't look good, but it might be fun. Finally, I want to see more of the world. I'll probably have more time in the future, so I'll go around and stay in a city that I like Hangzhou or Chengdu for a while. After I rest for a few months, I'll continue writing stories for everyone to read. But I really don't know when I'll start writing and where I'll publish it. Based on my personal habits, I'll definitely publish it on Asks. But I really don't know how to do short and medium-length stories. I'll discuss with my friends, and the moment I come to a conclusion, I'll report to everyone here and on my WeChat account. I've been sitting in front of my computer for the past few years. I've been slacking, playing, and sometimes working. I don't do any outdoor activities, but I like to drive around. No matter if it's Qing Kingdom or Yichang, I've visited many remote places. Most of the time, I go out late at night, so I don't have to worry about my safety. There are many places I like to visit, such as the main road in the east between two rows of old trees, the road to Sanyu Cave, and another special place. I've talked about many things over the years, and I don't know if I've mentioned them to anyone here. If I have, it'll be the first time I've mentioned them. On the road from Qing Kingdom to Blackfish Lake, we turned left into a field. There were cornfields and water bubbles on both sides. We kept driving forward, and we saw a burnt car parked there. It looked like a scene from a crime movie. The leader and I often went there to watch it. Occasionally, the road would be flooded, and we would turn back with regret. We went there again in the winter of the year before last. The water that had flooded the road had been frozen into a mirror like ice. There were many sharp and beautiful icicles. I hesitated for a while, but in the end, I gathered my courage and stepped on the gas. Little Red slid across the ice, and I listened to the sound of the tires crushing the icicles. It was very exciting. On the way home, a car honked at me. It felt like they wanted to fight for the lane. When the car stopped side by side, I was angry and anxious. The window rolled down. Before I could say anything bad, the guy on the other side quickly and gently said, "Don't misunderstand. I saw that your tires are flat, so I wanted to remind you." I felt ashamed and grateful. Have I told you this before? What I really wanted to say was, it doesn't matter if your tires are flat. You have to change them. In order to see beauty, it's worth it to take some risks. I think that no matter if it's work or life, you should have this attitude. Thank you. Goodbye. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.